Welcome, everyone, to the MMA Vivisection with me, Zane Simon, and my co-host, Connor Rebish. We are here to talk about UFC 211, which has both of us very excited. And it looks like an awesome card. We've been talking... We've had a lot of, is this the best card of the year discussion so far this year? The UFC on Fox card was a really good one going in. UFC 210 was set up to be really good going in before a couple of last minute weirdness, stuff like that. We've had cards that we thought were pretty decent, but this is undoubtedly the UFC's high point so far.
Yeah, no question about it. And I have very little, it's a long card, and that is always a bit of a worry. It's now 14 fights now that Cejudo Pettis is off the card. Or no, now 13 instead of 14. But
yeah, it was going to be really long.
Yeah, but even so, it's not just a card where you say, oh, there's big names at the top, so I'm interested, I'm invested to see where they go. It's also the matchups are all very competitive, and most of them seem to guarantee action. Especially the top two, Jedrzejczyk, Andrade, and Miocic dos Santos are very likely going to be wars. And then, Edgar Rodriguez, Alvarez Poirier, Skelly Knight, Reyes Vic. There are a lot of fights that are just pretty much guaranteed to be back and forth all the way.
Definitely. Yeah, it's going to be a hard one to pick, honestly. I've been watching more tape all morning, and I'm just I don't know who the hell is going to win this fight for most of it. So I will find out as we go along, as is so often the case. And then, hopefully be right more often than wrong. We might as well just dive right in, though, because we've already been running late, mostly due to me trying to play a little extra catch-up and all that, and Connor trying to figure out where his mic was and how it worked. But
don't give me equal blame for that, okay? I sorted the mic out very quickly.
You did, but you were also 10 minutes late to a show that,
I was 7 minutes late. That's because I was playing with my cat and didn't look at my phone, okay? I have a very good excuse.
Okay, yeah. Today's Thursday, Connor. Thursday.
Yeah, let's get to it.
All right, let's jump straight in. Joachim Christensen versus Gadzimarad Antigulov.
Should I take this first one?
Yeah, of course. You always lead.
I think we should probably be a little more excited about Gadzimarad Antigulov. As a light heavyweight up-and-comer, he's, I think, 30 years old. Not that old for this division. Still has a few years left in him, I would imagine. And he's really good. He should be on that Krylov-Sirkunov track if all goes according to plan. He's sort of like a supercharged Fedor Emelianenko. I wouldn't say he has the depth of skill of Fedor, but in how he approaches fights on the feet, he does a lot of bombing people with his right hand and turning that into a tie-up. Very good clinch wrestler. Got a whole sneaky selection of foot sweeps and trips. He's also got a...
He has really quickly what I like to think of as a game that all flows really well together. It's always what I thought about Michel Prazeres too, when he was even before he's improved, is that idea of his striking's not deep, his wrestling is actually really pretty good, and his grappling is good, but everything works straight into the next part of what he's doing.
Yeah, it's a super athletic version of what Demian Maia does, where it's a pretty small selection of ideas, but it all is the connective tissue is very strong.
Yeah.
He's also got a pretty good single leg. He's a pretty well-rounded wrestler. Has a few ways to get in the fight to the ground, and that is where he's most dangerous. Christensen is a solid guard grappler, but it's hard to imagine him having a ton of success off of his back against somebody who is not only as skilled as Antigulov, but as strong. Antigulov is really a powerhouse. And while Christensen, I have to give him credit for being a tall guy who is surprisingly good at not getting hit in the chin. He's actually got a pretty good sense of distance and counterpunches pretty well. He can still be tagged because he's so much taller than his opponents, but there's a lot of tall fighters, we'll talk about James Vick in a little bit, who are not as good at evading those overhands. And he's pretty good at that. pretty good counterpuncher. But really what this is going to come down to is going to be takedown defense and getting back to his feet. And I haven't seen enough of that from Christensen to believe that he's going to be able to do it against such a powerful fighter. So I'm going with Antigulov. For consistency's sake, let me see what I picked him by. I don't know. I'll give you my pick in a moment. I have to find it. Oh, but I'm going with Antigulov, though.
Yeah, this for me really comes down to, and this is, I think, the big question with Gadzhimurad Antigulov is, can Antigulov get Christensen out of there in a hurry? Because Christensen is sort of like, he is the prototypical, like, quadruple A, and even, like, just tough guy to beat out there on the circuit in that he's got a really good chin. He's a pretty experienced grappler. He throws some good straight punches, and he's just tough. Like, he's a guy that even when he gets tired will keep coming after you just as hard and fights consistently round to round to round. And Antigulov is the biggest problem for him has been, can he keep up fighting the way he does for more than a round? Because he comes out like a house on fire. He's this super athletic, just overwhelming freak of nature. And then he just he either like submits you or it becomes this horrible slog. And if it becomes that, I think that Christensen can win, can throw straighter punches, do work, and make this a really tough, ugly fight. But it's hard to overlook what Antigulov can do early and assume that Christensen just survives that, especially since Christensen, we've seen like him get submitted by dudes that
he got submitted by Frank Waston.
Yeah, and Frank Waston is not nearly the grappler that Gadzhimurad Antigulov is.
I mean, Antigulov may have more trouble than, like, I think Frank Waston really surprised him with a tricky armbar, and so he's gonna know that Antigulov is looking for like the triangle choke or head arm triangles and stuff like that. But I can see what you're saying. The thing is that Christensen, I think, really likes the clinch.
Yeah,
and I think that may actually play against him here because that tall man's clinch is not going to be very effective when he's being mashed against the fence, and that is typically what Antigulov does to guys when he does get tired. Is just pin them against the fence, and even when he's tired, like he can just lean into you and keep most people stuck in that position.
True. Yeah, it's not a matchup that favors Christensen at all. His best luck would be if he can keep it at range, and he's a little too upright and plodding for that.
Yeah, I hope that if he does lose here, they don't cut Joachim Christensen. Like, I think he could be a James Vick for this division, like a very handy test for new prospects and a sort of gatekeeper into the top 10.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't mind to see Christensen be in the UFC until he retires, and considering he's 38, that
is he 38? Holy shit! Wow. My pick was for Antigulov by second round TKO. By the way, I think we'll get a ground and pound TKO.
All right, yeah. Let's see, Antigulov. He's had one second round finish in his career.
Yeah, fairly recently. He looked okay in the second round.
Yeah. But he tends to be a dude who rips people apart in the first round.
Yeah.
Then again, a lot of the people he's ripping apart were
not that great.
Not on his level.
Yeah.
All right. Odds on that fight. Joachim Christensen is the underdog, opening at plus 180, now out to plus 321.
Ooh.
Yeah. And Antigulov opening at minus 260, now out to minus 409. I mean, like, I feel like those started a little too close and then got way too wide. I don't know.
Yeah, it's hard for me to see because Christensen's not typically like a one-shot knockout artist. He's not it's hard for me to see him winning this fight in a strategy, but it is like, you're betting on a light heavyweight fight.
Yeah,
it's hard to favor someone
light heavyweights outside the top 15 right now, which kind of that gets closer to the heavyweight rule for me, where it's a little like plus and minus 200. Outside of that, you're starting to.
I mean, let's be honest, Zane. Light heavyweight is a worse division than heavyweight at this point.
It is a worse division than heavyweight, and I've said that for a long time, but it's also a little more predictable.
That's true. That can be true.
Anyway, I would be surprised if Christensen won this, and even at long underdog odds, I don't think there's much value in it.
Yeah, me neither.
That gets us to a featherweight bout: Gabriel Benitez versus Enrique Barzola.
Two of my boys, Zane. Two of my favorites.
This is going to be a tough one for you. I like both these fighters too. Barzola, he's kind of got that. He's got that funk to him with his wrestling. He's got this kind of weird, he like a little like Anti-Gulov. I'm not going to make that comparison too deeply, but he's got a very functional game. He can wing stuff at you that goes right into takedown attempts, and then he will just chain like crazy until something works. I do think that he's going to have trouble with Gabriel Benitez, though. I think that Barzola is the kind of fighter that really needs a lot of time and polish to make his game really highly functional in the UFC. Like, he's got a great game to beat guys who really don't have experience. It is a great game to beat the Kyle Bochniaks and Chris Avilas and Horacio Gutierrez's and Cesar Arzamendias of the world. Because there's funk in it. He'll come after you with a lot of pressure. If you're an inexperienced fighter, it looks like none of his wrestling looks like what you've seen in the gym, and he doesn't go away when you hit him hard.
Phil McKenzie called him like a D grade Dominic Cruz. And I think that's actually a pretty good comparison. His style is weird and unpredictable, and his wrestling is way better than you think because of his timing.
Yeah.
But with polish, he would look more like Dominic Cruz. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I can see that. I think that Gabriel Benitez might be a problem point for Barzola. I don't think that he's going to. I think that Benitez is just a little too experienced. His game is just a little too solidly built and put together. The way to beat Gabriel Benitez is with crazy funk, because Benitez is not a creative striker. He's not a creative fighter in general. He's a very polished, I have this set of technical tools, and as long as everything's living inside that set of technical tools, I will be very, very good. But Barzola's crazy on the feet I don't think it translates into something that beats Benitez.
It's not aggressive enough. I think his weirdness is really effective when you're coming after him. Yeah. When he is forced to come forward, then the fact that he doesn't have amazing defense starts to become a problem.
Yeah, and he's also not he's not the kind of killer striker where that crazy getting surprised by something from Enrique Barzola means getting knocked out.
Yeah. For sure.
Andre Fili is not the best striker in the world, but he's creative and he has some power. So when he really surprises you like he did to Benitez, then that's a major problem. And I think that Benitez can overcome any surprise to be a more technical, nuts and bolts striker who forces Barzola to pursue and picks him off. So I'm picking Gabriel Benitez here by decision.
Yeah, I'm with you pretty much. I think that again, if you were to pump Gabriel or Enrique Barzola full of the Bane chemical, he would probably be able to win this fight.
Yeah.
A little more proprioception, a little more power, a little more explosiveness. But as it is, he's got a very functional game for a guy who isn't particularly athletic.
Yeah.
And a lot of guys who don't have that breed of athleticism, he relies on stamina and work rate and having a good selection of tactics that all play off of each other pretty well. And Gabriel Benitez has like a more slimmed down version of the same thing, as you said, but I think he is substantially more athletic. He's faster. He's a very good athlete. He hits a lot harder. And I think he's probably good enough in scrambles we have seen him like be too willing to play guard before, but I think he's probably good enough in scrambles, especially training at AKA for a few years now, to deny a lot of Barzola's takedowns. And he's also got a very dangerous guillotine to threaten Barzola if he does, get in deep on a takedown attempts.
Yeah, like Kyle Bochniak didn't beat Enrique Barzola.
Yeah.
But there's a reason Kyle Bochniak got the win in that fight.
Yeah.
And it's because he was a better athlete who was able to scramble, able to make Benitez or Barzola work, and able to hit him with bigger shots a lot.
Yeah, and as long as it was on the feet, Horacio Gutierrez, who's a little bit better of an athlete, he was giving Barzola trouble on the feet as well. Barzola really needed his takedowns. So I think Benitez having just a good, accurate punch kick switch up with that left hand and left leg, moving pretty well, and also just being pretty damn fearless. Like, I was very impressed he didn't have to fight Sam Sicilia the way he did, Yeah. He could have moved more. He could have stuck him at range. He could have tied him up. He let Sam Sicilia come into range and then countered him. And he got tagged a couple times, but most of those exchanges ended up in favor of Gabriel Benitez.
Yep.
He's a pretty good boxer, despite how meat and potatoes his game is. Yep. So I think Benitez will probably win a decision. I think Barzola's tough enough not to get stopped, but it wouldn't surprise me if he got a finish in there somewhere. And I think it's the fact that he's more likely to get a finish that probably gives him the edge in this fight.
Yeah, I agree with all that. Odds, Benitez opened at -165, dropped all the way out to -237, and has been since slowly climbing back now to -150. So I'm not sure
it was hard for me, by the way, Zane. It's only that I finished my Sherdog preview a week ago, so I've had a week to like come to terms with the fact that I'm picking against Enrique Barzola, who is one of my favorite weird fighters.
Yeah, he's great. He's a joy to watch, honestly.
He is. He's really cool, and he's got a good life story, an interesting background. He's just, he's slated to be, for the time being, an elite journeyman more than anything else.
Yep. Barzola opened at +125, moved up to +185, and has since dropped all the way back down to +124. So quite a bit of movement on these lines over the past few days.
Yeah, maybe people like the volume and the wrestling of Barzola. It's not unwinnable for him,
Yeah, it's definitely not unwinnable. If Benitez does play a guard game, Barzola can get after him with takedowns early in
Barzola he's got very good ground and pound too. He's pretty dangerous on the ground.
He does have very good ground and pound. That's like the super sneaky, underrated part of his game that people don't expect. Yeah. I think the odds are a little close. If they get closer, I don't know. Maybe Benitez is worth a look.
What's he at right now?
He's at -150.
That might even be worth a bet, to be honest.
Yeah.
That's pretty close. I think it's a little closer than it should be.
That brings us to a heavyweight bout: Chase Sherman versus Rashad Coulter. And take it away.
It was supposed to be Dmitry Poborezhets taking this fight against Chase Sherman.
I was really excited to see Poborezhets.
Yeah, I thought he had some potential to be a pretty interesting heavyweight contender. He like Antigulov, he's this is like they have a much better feeder system set up in Eastern Europe where people can fight like not very good fighters until they get their legs under them.
That's just a whole bunch of people over there who have like they did Sambo all growing up as a kid, or they did judo all growing up as a kid, or they boxed or whatever.
Yeah, and I think it's because combat sports in general are much more popular. Like over here, it's like boxing, and then we get wrestlers who have nothing to do after their wrestling career is done.
Yeah.
But over there, it's like karate is really popular, sambo is really popular.
And so there are all these dudes to like on a weekend, you're like, oh, I need a fight. And there's some dude who's like, yeah, I did 5 years of judo. I want to fight this weekend. I'll fight you.
Yeah, it's like all of the combat sports you can think of are quite popular over there. So you get a lot of different guys who are, maybe aren't very good, but have some experience.
Yeah, they get you good cage time to like get a career going.
Yeah.
Fighters,
Instead,
we've said this before, but fighters need fighters. They need fighters who should not be fighting them to fight them. That is like the core of how fight sports are built, is on the backs of dudes who should not be in that fight at all and are willing.
You don't want too many. You don't want them to fight only guys who shouldn't be fighting them until they get to their big payday and then they just cash out. But you need a couple of we need to see how you do against somebody who you have every chance of beating, and you need to feel what it's like to dominate somebody. I think that's helpful.
Yeah, fighters need confidence. They need to be able to build and work on skills, and they need to be able to do it in a way that is relatively safe for them.
Yeah, I agree. Speaking of which, that's not been the case for Chase Sherman so far in the UFC. And it may be though fortunate for him that he's no longer taking on Reyes and has a very short notice replacement in Rashad Coulter, who I think it was in training. He talked to James Lynch, and I think he said he was in training. And he had a fight coming up in July, but he still did not get the benefit of a full camp to prepare for an opponent. And he's he also he has fought not many times, and they have been not very good fighters. So he's kind of got the worst of both worlds. Mm-hmm. And he's a pretty bog standard, heavyweight regional fighter. He's relatively good at staying moving, but he's also very short. He hits pretty hard, but I don't know that he's a crushingly powerful puncher compared to most heavyweights in the UFC. And I just don't know that he has the level of experience to the diversity of experience to hang at this level just yet. And so all of that is good news for Chase Sherman, who has a lot of good attributes, but has had a really difficult time with opponents in the UFC. Sherman got beaten to hell and back by Justin Ledet, and then he got obliterated by Walt Harris in a knockout that I think we forgot about, but was probably one of the best knockouts of 2016. Mm-hmm. Walt Harris just hit him with the prettiest Street Fighter combo you're ever going to see. But Chase Sherman, as far as heavyweight goes, he can take a hell of a shot. He is quite durable, and he did take quite a few from Harris before actually getting knocked out. And it took a combination to knock him out. He had to be hit by three shots in a row, and then was still standing up right after the finish. And he's got a pretty good gas tank for a heavyweight. He reminds me in a lot of ways of and this will be blasphemous to some people, but of an early career Frankie Edgar, minus the wrestling. So his body, he uses a lot of movement. He's got better kicks than you think he does. He throws a decent amount of volume, but a lot of the movement is extraneous. It's purposeless, and he relies so much on getting out of the way that when you catch him in the pocket, it's clear that he doesn't know how to defend himself. Doesn't have head movement, doesn't really block. His head is just right there to be hit when he's in range.
He's also got a huge head.
He does, yeah. He's got that Stipe Miocic build going on.
Yeah, he's built almost exactly like a slightly, goddammit, upsized version of Brian Stan.
Sure. Zane has to cut his mic off. Yeah, so I think ultimately Sherman is well conditioned enough, moves enough, and can take enough of a shot to put some volume on Coulter. I think specifically the leg kicks that he throws are going to be a big factor here against someone who is more or less just a boxer. So I like Sherman to win by a decision.
Yeah, I mean, part of this is a little tough for me because I really haven't seen enough tape on Rashad Coulter.
Yeah, there's not a lot out there.
Yeah, there's not a lot out there. And Chase Sherman is the biggest worry I have, honestly, for Chase Sherman is that I'm not sure how adaptive he is, and I'm not sure how good his training is.
Yeah.
And so, I don't know that he's going to get more adaptive over time.
He does strike you as a guy who could do like quite well at an ATT or something like that, you know?
Yeah, he's very light on his feet. He was a football player up through college.
He's a solid athlete. He takes a shot well. He's got a lot of the things you need at heavyweight. He
looks like he's been started out with some fundamentally poor mechanics that have not improved.
Yeah.
Like, even if he's going to become a better fighter just through natural osmosis of, like, the more time you spend fighting good fighters, you are going to become slightly better. Like the OSP way, you just sort of absorb being better over time. It does make you, it does not make me feel especially like he's gonna make the leaps he could. But yeah, coming in, like bringing in a 35-year-old regional heavyweight on short notice who has faced really limited competition. Even he's pretty athletic, but Chase Sherman is the biggest thing for me is that Chase Sherman's really hard to hurt, and Sherman's had enough experience getting in the UFC a couple times that he knows relatively how to survive, like what's going to be required after the first round.
Yeah,
and I don't think that Coulter is going to be ready for that at all. So.
I agree.
Even if Coulter nails him several times in the first round, I feel like we're likely to see Sherman survive and then be able to pour on volume as the fight goes on.
Yeah, I agree.
Let's see. Rashad Coulter is opened at plus 150, is now at plus 122. And Chase Sherman opened at minus 190 and is now minus 148, which I'm a little surprised that those lines are closing.
Yeah, I'm not really bothered by it, though. No. Like, you look at Chase Sherman's last two fights, it is hard to have a lot of faith in him as a winning fighter.
That is very true.
Even a lot of our praise for him has been how well he soaks up damage, which I think is a useful ability, but it still doesn't exactly. It's not a great selling point for you as a guy to bet on to win.
Yeah, it's just that at heavyweight, the like marquee note trait is the ability to soak up damage.
Yeah, like in a division where everybody knocks everybody out, not getting knocked out goes a very long way.
Yeah, so. Otherwise, the odds are fine. Honestly, anything I don't even think about or touch this fight.
No,
it's heavyweight. Just leave it. That brings us to a women's strawweight bout: Jessica Aguilar versus Courtney Casey, and this is an interesting one for me because, I like Jessica Aguilar. She seems like a really good person, and she is obviously she's a long-time vet of the sport. One of the few women to have been, one of the few women in this division who's been around and fought everybody. But she really does have something to prove at this point.
She's been fighting since 2006.
Yep, she's
crazy.
A decade in at this point.
She is old school.
Yep. And the thing is that Aguilar's game has never been pretty. It is the classic stifling game. It's wall and maul and just wrap you up on the ground and suck you into this prolonged war of attrition and, busy but not terribly effective kickboxing. And Courtney Casey is a really functional litmus test right now because she's athletic and she's big and she's powerful and she's having to learn how to have a real MMA game in the UFC.
Yeah, it's kind of like a lot of dynamism with a limited skill set versus a diverse skill set with limited dynamism. It's an interesting fight for that. Like it's two very different kinds of fighters. It's like a crafty journeywoman, and a, like a talented but somewhat disappointing prospect who is actually maybe a little too old to be called a prospect.
Yeah, she may not really be so much a prospect. I mean, she's only 4 years into her career, so I expect her to keep improving.
True,
I
yeah.
think she's gonna continue to improve into her mid-30s and then fall off. Probably that's how most fighters, even fighters who start late, tend to follow that same kind of path. But yeah, I mean, it's it's the fighter that can submit Randa Marcos and still gets totally shut out by Claudia Gadelha. Thing is that Randa Marcos and Claudia Gadelha are both a lot more dynamic than Jessica Aguilar. And Marcos is a lot less, stick to it, be able to really meet a cohesive game plan continuously. But I don't know. Like, I have my doubts about this. I get the feeling that Courtney Casey is going to win this fight in this very Jessica Penne, Danielle Taylor, Valerie Letourneau. Was it who was that fighter she lost? Was it Poliana Botello or was it somebody else? Because I don't know if Botello's fought yet.
I can't recall. I'll look it up. You keep going.
Yeah, so we have this wave going on in women's strawweight of a lot of the old school, the like veteran old school taking big losses to really unknown,
raw but athletic fighters. It was Viviane Pereira, yeah. And Courtney Casey might be the next to that. My biggest worry for this, and the biggest reason I think to pick Aguilar, is that Casey will pull guard. And she will get taken down, too.
And she will get taken down. She will get taken down, and she will pull guard, whether she's winning or not.
Yeah.
Like, whether she's outstriking Jessica Aguilar or not, she will get taken down, and she will pull guard. And the likelihood of her submitting Jessica Aguilar is really slim.
Jag was submitted in her first fight and has not been submitted since in over 10 years, even though she's fought like Megumi Fujii, Carla Esparza, Claudia Gadelha. Like, she's fought some good grapplers and no one has been able to hold her down or submit her.
Yeah. Because of that, I am going to pick Jessica Aguilar, but I have this suspicion that she could go, like Courtney Casey could just go out and put it on her.
Yeah, I think that Casey will definitely have some big moments. She is a fighter who finds those big moments, and I hope to see Courtney Casey, like maybe switch up her training camp situation and align herself with somebody who can really give her game plans and round out her game. Like,
I thought she did get a better camp going.
She did, but I don't know if it's really even still a very big camp. I think she made a switch up and made some obvious improvements. But let's see. You can find out what camp she's at now if it says on Wikipedia.
I'll do that while you're talking.
But the thing is, we know about Jessica Aguilar is she's still extremely tough. She's very, very durable, and she's aided, of course, by the fact that strawweight is not a division in which people typically get knocked out. The women are just very small, and they just don't hit that hard compared to the bigger people. But she managed to survive a lot of nasty shots from Claudia Gadelha. And if we're comparing the two, if we use MMA math, as limited as it is, Jag definitely did a lot better against Gadelha than Casey did. In fact, I thought that Aguilar did pretty well in that fight, considering like the difference between their athletic abilities. She adapted very well. Like, her experience showed, because she got lit up in the first round and then got lit up a little less in the second round, and then hardly got lit up at all and landed a lot of low kicks and a lot of good counters in the third round. She still ate plenty of shots, but the big ones weren't coming anymore. And as Gadelha slowed down, Aguilar was kind of just getting going, despite the fact that her face was just busted up all to hell. She kind of impressed me in that fight, despite losing very clearly. And Courtney Casey did not impress me against Claudia Gadelha. You know what I mean? Like, she basically got dominated, and she just couldn't control how the fight played out. That's the big problem for her, is that she's very dynamic, very athletic and very powerful and big. She's a really big strawweight, but she just couldn't. She has no ability to control fights. And I think that is what Aguilar has that makes the difference here, is that she's the one who throws the output. She's the one who can score the takedowns. She's the one who can control top position. She's the one who can scramble free if she ends up in a bad position on the ground. She's a very able scrambler. Like Gadelha was not able to hold her down at all. Aguilar constantly got back up to her feet, didn't get submitted, didn't get caught in a bad position, did a really good job with that. So I think that Aguilar's like experience and well-roundedness are going to be the deciding factors here.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's just I have this gut feeling somewhere that I'm ignoring. That's my big thing, is that like having seen all of these veterans lately just sort of, and it's actually like I think it's partially just a trend that's going on across the UFC. I shouldn't unfairly malign the women's division. That just happened to Jeremy Stevens too. Where like your solid veteran talent who should know how to deal with fighters with a pretty limited game or with like a pretty burgeoning game just look totally dumbstruck in the headlights. But the thing is that Courtney Casey, she doesn't like the big thing with fighters like Danielle Taylor and Moicano has been that they really know how to stick to a plan. They may not be the most diverse fighters or the most inspiring performers in any one moment, but they have these very functional technical plans that they can stick to and that they can use to keep even a much more experienced opponent at bay. And Courtney Casey does not really seem to have that at all. Anyway, odds on that fight. Courtney Casey is currently open. She opened at -120, and the line has stayed pretty static there at -120. Actually, looks like somebody opened her at underdog odds. It looks like somewhere there's a brief spike in there, but she opened at -120, has stayed at -120. Jessica Aguilar opened at -120, is now at -104, has flirted with plus odds a bit, up to +104, but
we did forget to mention, by the way, that it has been 2 years basically since Aguilar fought Gadelha.
Yeah,
she had a long layoff before then. I think she, like the farther you get into your career, the further you get into your career, the easier it is to come back from a layoff. Like your experience is still there, and it can often do good for you to have a layoff to kind of rejuvenate yourself after all these hard battles. But it is something to consider.
Yeah, well, and she's also like a really entrenched part of the women's MMA, or of the staff at ATT, of like the culture at ATT. So I would be really surprised if she was not like in the gym all the time.
Yeah.
There.
Yeah. And I haven't heard that she was injured or anything. I think maybe she just took a layoff.
Yeah, I know there have been different times where she's been talking about retiring and stuff like that. So
she's got a full-time job too.
She had an ACL
tear. Oh, okay. So then that may favor the Casey side. That may explain some of the odds and why she's the slight underdog.
Yeah. I feel like I don't bet. Obviously, I've said that every time. I will always say it because I don't. But I don't feel like it's worth, like, even as close as it is in Aguilar being an underdog, I don't feel like it's worth anything.
No. It's not a very good card for betting. Like, no. It's most of the lines, most of them reflect the fight, and most of the fights are extremely close.
All right, that brings us to Marco Polo Reyes and James Vick.
Speaking of weird lines, we'll wait for you to read them, but I am surprised by the fact that Polo Reyes is a pretty massive underdog to James Vick. Like plus 300. I get the idea that Vick is like this divisional mainstay. I think people think of Polo Reyes as being sort of a brawler. But I think it stands to be a very close fight. And I think that Reyes brings to the table a lot of things that Vick tends to struggle with. Mm-hmm. Vick is, as we noted before when talking about Joachim Christensen, very hittable, as most tall fighters are. And he is a huge lightweight. He's lanky, but he's extremely tall for the division. And seeing him get melted by an overhand from Beneil Dariush is like exactly the image you expect when you see somebody who hits hard fighting a really tall guy without defensive skill. He's gotten better in that regard lately, not necessarily that in that his like head movement has improved much, but that he's better at maintaining the distance, which is always the problem for tall guys, is if they can just keep you out of the range at which you can land your shots. But Vic is more or less a, to me, he's like a neutralizer. He's like not a counter fighter per se, but he counters what you want to do. So like he's got the front headlock to ward off wrestlers. And now, as we saw against Abel Trujillo, a flying knee to play off of that as well. He's got a long jab to keep people at range, but he's not particularly good at taking over a fight unless like you are completely dead in the water.
Scaring you out of coming after him. Like that's the big thing.
Yeah. And I think part of that too is because Vic has a lot of swagger. Like he's a very confident fighter, but perhaps more confident than he should be in his kickboxing.
Perhaps also looks more confident than he is. You know, he's better at taking you out of your game than when he actually has to be confident and pressure.
Yeah.
Then it's like, wait, where's all that confidence going? And why are you just watching? Oh, damn it. Now I hate it when my brain does this. It's broken off here. But why are you just hanging out and watching the kind and like, who is like a one-handed fighter?
Yeah, and I think we may see some of what arose in that Hine fight, or a little bit of what arose in the Dariush fight from Polo Reyes, who hits hard. I don't think he's like the hardest hitter in the division, but he's certainly powerful, and he can fuck you up if he hits you with his fists. He's also a capable kicker. He can throw some like Dutch style combinations. He used those really well against Jason Novelli in his last fight, which, by the way, Jason Novelli looked really good in that fight. Like, it was the best he'd looked in the UFC and fought a really good, smart outside game. And again, one of the things that always impresses me about Reyes is how well he adapts from one round to the next. And so he had a very close round with Novelli in the first, and then I thought pretty clearly won the last two by changing up his approach. And he changed it up by throwing kicks when Novelli would pull away, making sure he would hit him even if he missed on his punch combination, doubling up on his jab, and just upping his pressure, going for the body, throwing more combinations. He does those things well, like when he needs to do them. The problem is the thing that worries me for Reyes' sake is that I think a lot of that comes from Eric Del Fierro, who is a very experienced coach with a good head for boxing, and he has always. It's fun to watch Polo Reyes' fights and see how coachable he is. Like, one of the ways that he adapts so well is because Del Fierro will tell him what he wants and he'll do it, which is a hard thing for a lot of fighters to do.
Yeah.
But he does that well, even in fights that are insanely difficult, like where you can't imagine how you can really think and process instructions, like that fight with Maestro Kim, with a Maestro Dong Hyun Kim, which, like Reyes got rocked several times and was just trading shots, got exhausted, and then got a second and then a third wind in the one fight. But the instruction that made the difference was that Del Fierro, in the midst of this crazy war, said, you need to hit the body. And he went out in the second round and he battered the shit out of Dong Hyun Kim's body. And it made the difference. It slowed Kim down enough that Reyes could knock him out in the third. So the thing that worries me there is that he's not going to have Del Fierro in his corner this weekend. He's been training at Entrem Gym, which is a very good gym in Tijuana, with like a lot of the best Mexican fighters in the UFC have come out of Entrem, but I don't necessarily have a good feel. Like, I'm not saying they're not good coaches. I just don't know what their coaching style is like as much as I do Del Fierro's. So that could be a problem. But if they give him the right advice, if the game plan is correct, I think the fact that Vic tends to neutralize more than going after his opponents is actually going to make it so that even if Reyes starts to tire, even if Vic starts to wear on him, there may be a big deficit built up by the third round of Reyes just landing the better shots. And it's hard for me to see this fight with these two guys. Like, I definitely see Vic hitting a lot of jabs, but I cannot see this fight playing out without Reyes landing at least one crushing overhand and several really hard right low kicks, both of which Vic is not very good at defending. So I think Vic probably still deserves to be the favorite, but I'm going on the flyer. I think that Reyes is going to take a decision over him.
Yeah, I mean, one of the hard things I think with looking at guys that fight James Vick and like the wins he gets is also looking at how easy is it to get those fighters that he's fighting to beat themselves. You know, you look at guys like Ramsey Nijam, guys like Nick Hine. I like Nick Hine, but you know, guys like Abel Trujillo,
Blaiko França. Yeah, a lot of the guys that he's beaten have sort of, beaten themselves, like given up, or
they're fighters who can be rattled. Yeah. Like, you know, one of the big things about Nick Hine, I remember watching him come up, is just like he throws really hard. He even has some clean technique, but he does not seem to have a lot of confidence in actually being able to strike with people.
What, he knocked Vic down like 3 times, but in that fight, but still didn't have. There was nothing that looked like real killer instinct.
Yeah,
and Vic is not that way. Vic is an opportunistic finisher, and he does not get rattled.
No, or at least not in the same way.
Yeah.
And Polo Reyes, we know he is unshakable. Like, we know this without question, because you don't fight that fight he had with Maestro Kim and win that fight if you're the kind of dude who gets worried about being in a firefight. And I think that, to me, may be the real pushing factor here is, and I think it's partially, it's what made Beneil Dariush so successful, is that Dariush too is a guy who was just going to march at Vic, and whether Vic hit him or not, Dariush was not going to go away and stop punching him.
You got to knock him out to stop him fighting you.
And if that is what Vic is going to face, and he's also not going to face somebody in Polo Reyes who's going to close him down and clinch him. Because then you can say, like, there's Jake Matthews. Jake Matthews is not an easy fighter to rattle. But Jake Matthews is also a come in on a straight line, throw 2 punches, shoot for a takedown. You know, you make Jake Matthews throw more than 2 or 3 strikes, or box for more than 30 seconds, and you know that he's going to try and put you against the cage and get in on your legs.
Jake Matthews is like an excellent athlete whose game is just like the MMA for beginners textbook. Like, it's very predictable, very sort of mechanical.
Exactly. And Polo Reyes is not going to do that. It's going to be on Vic to pressure Reyes and get him to the mat if he wants this fight on the floor.
Yeah. And I think that he would have a much better chance in this fight. Like, the odds wouldn't be so far off, by my reckoning, if Vic had a really good offensive wrestling game, but he doesn't.
He's a much better scrambler on the ground, and he's much better at hitting the openings you give him trying to wrestle and grapple him than he is at forcing you to wrestle and grapple with him. That really pushes it for Reyes for me. Just the idea that if Reyes is going to sit at boxing range and pressure and push forward and come out Vic with a diverse attack, Vic either has to knock him out or he's going to be on the wrong end of a lot of exchanges as the fight goes on. Because even against Hine, which was mostly a kickboxing match because Vic couldn't get Hine down, he almost lost that fight. Like, he came really close, and it was only Hine's hesitancy to throw more that got him the win in that fight.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Vic has scored 1 takedown in the UFC. It was on Abel Trujillo, and he has been taken down 11 times. And so, even though he's
I nailed that fight call because Abel Trujillo has gone away.
He's done. Yeah. Yeah. That's the kind of thing, like, and honestly, even that fight, like seeing James Vick fight Trujillo the way he did, even kind of worries me for him in this fight, because he really thought he was the shit on the feet, and like he's like throwing flying knees and coming forward with combinations, and I just don't know if that's a good idea in a fight with Polo Reyes. Like allowing him into the pocket is very dangerous.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm taking Reyes too. I think this is a really bad matchup for Vic unless Vic can show a better, more consistent pressure wrestling game than he has, or has really cleaned up his boxing a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't necessarily say it's a close matchup. Like I do think Vic, he's tough. He can take a shot from most guys pretty well.
Yep, he can take a shot really well, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, he recovers. He's big. He's strong. He's got more power than you think he does. And we have seen him polish his boxing game in recent years. Like the fight with Glyco França was a really nice exhibition of how to keep somebody at range with the jab and nail them with the 1-2. But França was also gassed for 2/3 of that fight.
Yeah, França, like early on, França did pretty well.
He still tagged Vic throughout the entire fight, even after getting tired. So I just see too many opportunities for somebody as dangerous as Reyes, provided that he can make the right adjustments, because he probably will have to adjust. Considering the way that first round against Jason Novelli went, Vic is going to do something a little similar.
Yeah.
So, he's going to have to adjust to that. And if his corner is up to the task, though, I think he deserves to be, considered much closer than the odds have him.
Yep. Yeah, honestly. So now looking at the odds again, I see your trepidation. Reyes opened at plus 195, is now out to plus 308. And Vic opened at minus 275 and is now at minus 397. So I don't know. That's a big underdog for somebody that we both feel like has a very good shot to win this fight.
Yeah, I think if you're going to make a bet on this card, that's probably one of the ones to go for. You could also perhaps look at this ending in under a round and a half, because both guys lose in the first round when they lose, but they're also both very tough. And I don't see Vic easily finishing Reyes, and I think that Vic is going to be harder than most of Reyes' opponents to hurt and put away. So,
all very fair. Yeah, it is kind of a question, too, with like, against Vic, how much Beneil Dariush does Reyes have to be to beat him? Like, how much Beneil Dariush do you have to be to beat James Vick?
Can you beat James Vick if you're 70% Dariush?
Yeah, because like you go back to the Nick Hine fight, and that's like 20% Beneil Dariush, and then you got 100%. Where's the line? Like,
yeah,
I think Reyes is across it, but it'll be interesting to see.
Yeah.
That brings us to a featherweight bout: Jared Gordon versus Michael Quinones. And this is one of those fights where I kind of like. I mean, obviously, it's hard to call because there's not a lot of tape on Gordon. There's not even a lot of tape on Quinones. From what I can see, Quinones is the sort of classic great athlete who has gotten some basic MMA striking ideas down and is really trying to learn more of them over time. Like, there's a lot of big single, I'm going to land this super hard body kick, I'm going to land this big overhand or 1-2 combo that, dynamic, leaping in, hoping to overwhelm you with the moment of athleticism and then stay out of trouble fighter. Like, he fights like an athlete who has not done a lot of other, like, who maybe did karate or taekwondo or something like that, but didn't do a lot of other functional combat sports.
Mm-hmm.
And Gordon is just kind of like your classic wrestler who has learned how to strike and is super, super, super confident in his wrestling. And unfortunately for Quinones, the game Gordon is offering looks like it's just well structured enough to beat what Quinones is doing. Like Gordon's wrestling, you talked about it before we started, like, and I've seen it on tape, like he can turn a corner, he can change up his approach mid takedown.
He's a good cage wrestler. He'll drive you into the fence. He's very good at finishing from that position.
Yeah, he's a good cage wrestler, which is also a really bad news for a lot of young developing fighters who tend to learn to counter wrestle off the cage first and foremost. And then Gordon is a busy fighter everywhere else. Like he's a busy striker on the feet to get to his wrestling. When he gets to the ground, he's not he's not just going to try and smother you. He's a very active striker from ground positions. Maybe to his detriment if Quinones can keep popping back up. But I haven't seen enough of Quinones' counter wrestling game to be like, this dude is untakedownable. Like, there's just no way. Like, it looks a bit to me, this fight has like the same kind of basic metrics as like Kwang Ho Kwok versus Brett Johns. With neither guy being quite as good as Brett Johns or Kwang Ho Kwok. But it was impossible not to take Brett Johns in that fight just because of the way it was going to match up round to round to round.
Yeah.
So, that's it.
Yeah, I think I would compare it to like Dariush versus Magomedov if you take away the diverse kickboxing of Beneil Dariush, but up the wrestling a little bit. Like the approach that Dariush took in that fight was all about cage wrestling.
Yeah.
And if you gave Rashid Magomedov more athletic ability, but a lot less craft and experience.
Yeah.
I
so not much of a comparison, but
yeah, I mean, we're talking about debuting featherweights here.
Yeah.
I compare Quinones to Magomedov because he's like all about the counter right hand and the left kick. He's got a very quick, powerful left kick, which he can throw without a step or without a switch. It's a very sneaky weapon, and he likes to push you back with the right and then follow with the left kick, just like Rashid does, which is a really good switch up for somebody who likes a long range fight. But we don't have the same level of defensive craft, and we don't have the same level of counter wrestling, certainly. Like if Rashid Magomedov was not Rashid Magomedov, Beneil Dariush would have taken him down a bunch of times. As it was, he just held him against the fence.
If Rashid Magomedov couldn't counter wrestle, he would lose every.
Yes, he would lose a lot, and I like Quinones makes up for that by being more dangerous and more aggressive, but he's still levels below that. And I think that Gordon's just sort of meat and potatoes wrestle boxing, while it will certainly give Quinones counter opportunities, it will also mean that like Quinones strikes me as a guy who he's not going to constantly stick you with a jab and make you chase him and keep you at bay. He's going to look to knock you out with a big shot as you're coming in. And if he doesn't knock you out, then he's going to get tied up. So, and there's also the fact that Gordon has a lot more experience in long fights. He has had a lot of his fights go to decision or into the later rounds, and that does mean he's less dangerous, but it probably also means that after the first round, where Quinones gets most of his wins, he's going to be a lot more comfortable. So I like Gordon by decision.
Yeah, it's one of those things where I'm just not willing for dudes who are jumping off of the regionals into the UFC to bet on like this guy's going to get that first round KO.
Yeah.
Which is what I think you would have to bet on if you're going with Quinones here. Is you'd have to say like, nah, he's going to knock him out in the first round. Because if he doesn't, otherwise I think he's just going to get pressured to death.
How old is Quinones? He's pretty young. Like he does have a lot of potential.
Yeah.
He's as young as I think he is.
He looks like a great athlete building the. He reminds me of.
He's 32 though.
No, he's 32. Okay. That's too bad. He didn't start fighting until 2011, so there's still room to grow.
Yeah.
But
he strikes you as a guy who could be a legit prospect if he wasn't, if he was like 25.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember who was that guy out of Millennia MMA.
Willie Gates?
No, welterweight. And he fought. I'm trying to remember who he fought. Oh, he fought Cowboy Oliveira. in a surprisingly back and forth fight.
Just have to look up Alex Oliveira.
Yeah. Joe Merritt. He reminds me of Joe Merritt, where it's like I'm looking at this and it's like you have you're a good athlete with the basic strong fundamentals, nuts and bolts of a striking game, and I don't know to trust anything else beyond that. There's not enough depth there for me to be like, you will absolutely go on to success.
Agreed.
All right. That brings us the odds on that fight. Let's see. Odds. Where is this on this fight? Okay, there it is. Jared Gordon is the favorite, opening at -150, dropping to -170, and climbing back to -150. And Michael Quinones is opening at +110, opened at +110, jumped to +138, now to +127.
That's fine. That's within the realm of reason.
It's within the realm of reason, and I wouldn't even look at this fight between two debuting featherweights.
Nah.
All right, that brings us lightweight bout: Eddie Alvarez, Dustin Poirier.
Haven't we skipped Skelly Knight?
Oh, we did skip Skelly Knight. All right.
You don't want to skip that one, Zane.
No, I don't. So this is you.
This fight's awesome. It's one of those fights that like people wouldn't show up for it, but they should. Like these guys don't have a ton of name value, but they're both very fun. They're both.
It's the kind of fight that would pack some tiny regional promotions house, where like both these guys are hometown favorites fighting.
Sure. This would be like an amazing. This would be like an amazing like legacy title fight even between both of these guys. You know, like so. Jason Knight has unveiled a new game since his first fight in the UFC, where he was. I think we had a good read on that when we talked about it. We're like, he's a guy who plays guard. How is that going to work against Tatsuya Kawajiri? Turns out not well, which I think most people expected. Then he fights Jim Ehlers, and we're like, oh, you know, more guard grappling, maybe a closer fight. And he comes out and just goes to war with Jim Ehlers on the feet. And suddenly we have Jason Knight, dangerous boxer who throws volume, takes a shot really well, and pours on the aggression when he needs to. And seems to have some good killer instinct as well. Like he's a mean dude in the cage.
Mm-hmm.
His boxing game is not particularly deep. He's not very good defensively. Still fairly rote with his combinations, but he's got a good sense of distance. He knows when to like get it back after you have some success against him. He will then pour it on and make sure that you don't look better than him in this exchange.
Mm-hmm.
And he's beaten some solid guys, you know, like he looked great against Alex Caceres. He outboxed Dan Hooker, which was pretty impressive. Like he's done a pretty good job. And he still has that submission grappling savvy. And I think Pat Wyman said on Heavy Hands, and I think he's right, that he's a little more dynamic with his grappling than Skelly in like you give him an opening, he will jump on it. Whereas Skelly is very Skelly can do a lot of things on the ground very well, but he's a little more methodical.
Mm-hmm.
But Skelly is also, I think, the substantially better wrestler.
Definitely. Unquestionably.
He's a very big, strong guy for this division. He's not as explosive as Knight, but Knight is not a phenomenal takedown defender, and Skelly has a pretty good takedown game. And on the ground, Knight is able to take advantage of those quick openings, but Skelly is less likely to give him those openings than most people on the ground. Skelly's very comfortable in pretty much any position you can think of. Every time we talk about him about his leg lock sweeps that he'll end up on the bottom, get a heel hook position, turn it into a sweep, take half guard. He's a very good, like an advancing fighter, methodical but creative. And so we have an interesting fight here where both guys can hang in the other's world, but not necessarily to the right level. Like Skelly is also better than you think on the feet. He hits pretty hard. He can take a good shot. And
his time at Black Zillions actually has it's melded with his crazy confidence.
Yeah.
To even though he's awkward as hell, he actually presents more functional strikes at least.
Yeah, and he's always had a very good like sense of distance. One of the things that always stood out to me about Skelly is that even when he was like being outstruck because he's kind of slow and doesn't have great defense, he would know right when you were on the end of the range for his right hand, and he would let it go and hurt you. So I kind of feel like Skelly can hang around on the feet well enough to get this to the ground, where I think he will, by being the better controlling fighter, he will have an advantage. But Skelly, Knight's volume on the feet will be a problem. Knight's dynamism on the ground will be a problem, especially if he doesn't accept playing guard, if he has improved that aspect of his game. But I think he is still a little bit that fighter, and will probably try to engage Skelly in a submission battle that probably won't favor him. So I think it'll be an amazingly good fight between two very fun and underrated fighters, but I like Chaz Skelly to take a decision.
Yeah, it's an interesting one in that, like, Knight is just not set up to win this fight, but he could. You know?
Absolutely. Yeah, for sure.
Like, his game is not built to win this fight. He's not built to defend takedowns. He likes to square up and challenge you to just outstrike and throw down with him. He's not there to sprawl. He's not there to stop you from shooting on him at all. That's not a concern. It's not how he wants to fight. His ground game is really fairly unproven at this level, honestly. Like, even before the UFC, I remember his fight in Titan FC against Musa Hamanaev. It was basically Jason Knight getting worked for a round, trying the same single submission over and over and over and over before Hamanaev accidentally fell into it and got choked out.
Definitely in the Caceres fight, he showed that when he's not just trying to play guard, that dynamism on the ground is very valuable. But if he's stuck on the bottom, it's not helpful.
Caceres is also a here one moment, gone the next kind of fighter.
Caceres is an opportunistic fighter who is made for other opportunists. Somebody who can seize on a single moment of like a brain fart, or you get tired, or like you look away, or you get rocked. Those are the guys.
Confidence entirely in the middle of a fight, only to gain it back 2 minutes later.
Yeah, those are the guys that beat Caceres. And Knight is like the killer instinct of Jason Knight is what made the difference there.
Yeah. But Skelly is the opposite of a dude who gets rattled. He is way on the far end of guys who cannot be shaken off of their game, to his detriment at some point. Against really good elite fighters, that comes back to bite him. But when you're a guy who's going to square up and let Skelly in to push you against the cage, and who's going to let him get in on takedowns, and who's going to let him make the fight a mess, that's just exactly what Skelly wants and needs. And Jason Knight, for how fast his hands are and how accurate his boxing can be at times, he has yet to put anybody away with it. He's not just going out there and killing dudes on the feet. He's too hittable. I love him, but I think this is exactly the right fight to beat him.
Can Jason Knight start training with the Diaz brothers? Because I think it would be amazing, and I think it would really make a big improvement in his game.
I hope he can. Although, honestly, I don't know if that's really true. They have yet... I don't know of anybody who's, spent time training with the Diazes and really come away a functionally better fighter for it.
That's true. How about just do some sparring with Nick Diaz? Get Hick Diaz and Nick Diaz in the ring together and let them spar. Let them pick up some of those tricks. Because there's a reason he's compared to Nick Diaz, because he's aggressive, relies on volume. If Jason Knight was pawing the jab more, throwing to the body, he would be a very difficult, with his toughness and his aggression, he would be a very difficult striker to beat. But as for now, he's pretty undeveloped. He's just got the aggression and the instincts.
Yep. Jason Knight is the underdog, opening at plus 155 and dropping quickly to minus 117, but staying relatively close, plus 104. Chaz Skelly, the favorite, opening at -195 and rising quickly up into -117 and staying right around -128 now. So those lines got a lot closer quickly and have pretty much leveled off since then, with Skelly as the slight favorite. I think he deserves to be a little better favorite than that, frankly.
Yeah, I don't have too much of a problem with it. Like, I do think Skelly's hittable enough, Knight is mean enough that I can definitely see an opportunity arising. But
yeah, Skelly, but the dudes who have beat Chaz Skelly tend to be, I mean, there are only two, and they're Mirsad Bektic, who barely beat him and is way more athletic.
Yeah.
And then there's Darren Elkins, who is just fucking tireless, and you can't be Darren Elkins and beat Darren Elkins.
He's the OG, as you wisely pointed out before that fight. He's the OG version of what Chaz Skelly is.
Yep. All right, that brings us to a lightweight bout. Eddie Alvarez, Dustin Poirier. Man, the first of several really just amazing fights on this card. Like, when Dustin Poirier beat Jim Miller, I was out there like, he has to fight Eddie Alvarez. He has to fight Eddie Alvarez.
Yeah.
They need to make him fight Eddie Alvarez right now because that fight would be amazing. And it will be.
Yeah.
So I'm picking Eddie Alvarez in this. I don't really want to, but I am. Dustin Poirier, I remember seeing this chart the other day, and it backed up something I've long felt about Dustin Poirier, but is not. It was nice to see it reflected in numbers because it was surprising still. And it was on Twitter, Fightnomics read. He put out a chart of the strikers at UFC 211, where he has a thing where it's like significant strike accuracy in comparison to opponent and significant strike volume in comparison to opponent. And then, oh shit. And then, with like these little circles for the amount of power on display, or the amount of knockdown power and things like that. And Dustin Poirier was like way up on the accuracy, reasonable on the volume, and with the biggest circle in terms of knockdown ratio. And he is a much better striker than he gets credit for. And he's especially a much better power striker than he gets credit for. Like, I think that kind of backs that up for me.
Eddie Alvarez?
No, Dustin Poirier.
Oh, sure. You don't think he gets enough credit as a power striker? I think he's pretty well regarded as like one of the hardest hitters in the division.
I think he gets credit for being a brawler, and I think he continues. I don't know. I don't think he does. I don't think he gets that credit.
Oh, you mean like in terms of craft and skill? Not just the power in his hands.
Of just being somebody that can win toe-to-toe battles with pretty much with almost anyone in his division. Obviously there are, Conor McGregor and Michael Johnson out there to prove that wrong. But he hits really hard and really accurately. Like, and to a degree that surprises most of his opponents.
Yeah.
Like, I think it was shocking to Joe Duffy. And Joe Duffy started tuning him up over the course of that fight and forced Poirier to beat him with a wrestling game. Joe Duffy was like hitting him 2 times to every 1 time he got hit, but I doubt Joe Duffy expected to be getting hit that hard in every single exchange.
Yeah. Joe Duffy, who is a very competent defensive boxer, was going shot for shot with Poirier and didn't like it. Poirier was hitting him. He packs a punch, man. Like, I think he's close to comparable to Conor McGregor in terms of power.
And the thing is that Poirier, part of the reason he doesn't quite get that respect is that I don't think Poirier knows how to quite be the fighter he wants to be. And that's the big thing that I have that has me not picking him here. Because he absolutely could knock out Eddie Alvarez. Like, there's no question. He hits hard, and he is accurate, and he's able to throw down and scare people off of fighting with him. But he doesn't want to be that power brawler. Even as recently as the Jim Miller fight, all week up, he's talking like, oh, I'm going to be more process driven. I'm going to be craftier. I'm not going to be this brawler. And like halfway through the Jim Miller fight, he's like, okay, fuck it. I'm just going to throw down on this dude.
Halfway through the first round.
Yeah.
Yeah, it didn't take long.
And he's not comfortable in that. And it means that he's sort of effective despite himself. And in certain ways, where it's like, I don't want to fight like this, but I'm going to be really effective when I am. Whereas Eddie Alvarez knows exactly how Eddie Alvarez wants to fight. To the point that, you know, people like Eddie Alvarez watches a lot of tape. He game plans for people really well. But it's to game plan to fight like Eddie Alvarez every time. Like, okay, how do I be Eddie Alvarez against this dude?
Sure.
How do I, you know, that's the reason, unfortunately, like why no matter how you looked at it against Conor McGregor was just like, he's going to lose this fight.
He's going to be Eddie Alvarez,
yeah,
you know.
He's got to be Eddie Alvarez, and you can't be Eddie Alvarez and beat Conor McGregor. Like, you just can't. There's no real functional way to do that. And Dustin Poirier, like, a lot of when Poirier gets pressured is still about, can I scare this guy off? Can I get this person to back up and give me space again? Can I get them to let me be a craftier fighter that I want to try to be and not the brawler that I end up feeling like I have to be? And if he can't knock Alvarez out, if he can't scare Alvarez off and knock him out doing that, I think Alvarez's pressure game is just too consistent and too well defined for Poirier to win, for Poirier to be able to be the pressuring fighter in this fight. You know, if Poirier can pressure Eddie Alvarez continuously, then absolutely Poirier could win. But Alvarez doesn't tend to get driven off of that by people who aren't Conor McGregor. Like, if you're not the absolute elite at controlling range and timing to go with that power, Eddie Alvarez is going to be the dude coming after you. He's going to be the dude pushing the pace. You know, even against Anthony Pettis, who hits really hard. Like, Alvarez is the dude who's in your face, pushing the pace of the fight. And I think that he can do that to Dustin Poirier. I think that Poirier is not comfortable enough pressuring to keep on Eddie Alvarez unless he knocks him out, which he could. He absolutely could. I think Alvarez is going to win this and be able to take over and push Poirier on his heels, where Poirier is less comfortable and often just has to resort to trying to scare people off.
I think Dustin Poirier is going to knock Eddie Alvarez out in the first round, and then I think he's going to win the decision. Because I can hear myself through your mic all of a sudden. I don't know why that is.
Damn it.
No, that's all right. No, it's good. It's gone now. So there's, you know, Eddie Alvarez, we know, gets hurt by every single person he fights.
Yep.
He, he got hurt by Gilbert Melendez even. He definitely got hurt a billion times by Conor McGregor. He didn't get hurt by Rafael dos Anjos, but he did get tagged with a few good shots. And the thing is that Eddie Alvarez needs to be, like, woken up, I think, to be Eddie Alvarez. Mm-hmm. And that's going to be a dangerous thing just from the get-go against Poirier, who I do think will probably come to close the distance. We'll try to put Alvarez against the fence. We'll throw those combinations, which, to your point, are very good combinations. They're not he's not a brawler in this, you know, he gets into brawls, but he doesn't fight with like a reckless, thoughtless attitude. He picks his shots, he throws his combinations with design and with clever intent. And so in some ways, that come forward style is pretty good for Eddie Alvarez, because I think he's the big problem against Conor McGregor was that he had to close the distance, and he's not very good at it. He's much more comfortable as an outfighter and a counterpuncher, as we saw against Dos Anjos, right? And so McGregor just keeping the range and not like pecking away and forcing Alvarez to make the first move was just poison for him. It's not something he does that well. So Poirier is not going to give him that, I don't think. I think he's going to get in his face. And somebody, Alvarez has a good jab. He's got good footwork. He's got good counter punches. There are a lot of ways he can counter that sort of approach. But there are a lot of ways that Dustin Poirier can badly hurt Eddie Alvarez in ways that other people who have come forward can't. Like, he's a better combination puncher than someone like Michael Chandler, who just destroyed Eddie Alvarez in the early going of all three of their fights, like hurt him badly early every single time. He's durable enough. He got caught by Michael Johnson, but he can take a shot. He does get knocked down, but I think he's looked a lot more durable since going to lightweight. I think not having that extreme weight cut is good for his durability. And he can push a very good pace, which again is unlike somebody like Michael Chandler, who gets tired really easily. Dustin Poirier has a very good gas tank at lightweight. And it was one of the things that allowed him to beat Jim Miller in a fight that was very close. Like, Jim Miller made that a really back and forth fight, and especially hurt Poirier with leg kicks in the third round, which is also something that Eddie's probably not going to do. So, we have Alvarez getting some of what he wants, but we also have in Alvarez a guy who, you say that he always is Eddie Alvarez, but to me, part of that is engaging in brawls, like Eddie Alvarez standing his ground and throwing back at somebody. And while that could give him some success against someone who's fairly hittable in Poirier, it also means that Poirier, who is a very accurate, very skilled combination puncher, and who cuts some pretty good angles as he throws, is going to have opportunities to land the power shots. So I think what we'll see here is probably Alvarez winning some substantial portions of the fight, but getting banged up worse than Poirier in the exchanges when they do happen. And I think that's going to be enough for Poirier to take a decision.
Yeah, one of the things, part of it for me, I wonder about I wonder about Alvarez's ability to stick Poirier against the fence. Like, that's one of the big things that I'm wondering about.
Yeah, the thing is, Eddie, that was the thing that was driving me crazy when the McGregor fight came around. People were like, Eddie's going to out-wrestle him. No, but he's not that good of a wrestler. He's okay, and he's good on the ground. He's a good scrambler, but as a takedown artist, he's not that big, and he's kind of just stalls out when he can't get somebody with the initial shot. And Poirier is very good in the clinch, very dangerous in the clinch. I would be surprised if Alvarez could control Poirier for long portions of the fight. He'll probably try, but it would surprise me.
It'll be interesting. I'm picking Eddie Alvarez, but we both know he's going to get hurt in this fight, and it's just kind of a question of how bad and how early and how much. And
Alvarez is an underrated power puncher too. He may very well hurt Poirier once or twice in this fight. Most people are expecting it to be pretty crazy. Yeah. What we both can agree on is that it is going to be a really fun fight to watch. I would be surprised if Alvarez had a sort of he had a few of those really slow, uninteresting fights against Pettis and against Gilbert Melendez, but I don't think Dustin Poirier is going to allow that to happen. I think we're going to see a classic Eddie Alvarez fight.
Yeah, I do wonder too, though, if Dustin Poirier might let Alvarez off the hook early for getting woken up just by trying to be crafty Dustin Poirier.
Could be, yeah.
The worst version of Dustin Poirier.
Could be, yeah.
Oh, poor Dustin. At some point, he's headed towards a hard fall, I think, because it's that war of being the dude who gets in the war and gets hit a lot and throws down and fires back is all of his success is built around that, and he has no desire. He does not seem to have a lot of desire to be that person.
I think he's comfortable in those kinds of fights. I just think he's trying to. I think he's thinking about his longevity.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Is that it's not it's not that he's not good. It's not that he's then gets doesn't have the confidence to fight like that or get scared off of it or something like that. It's just that he doesn't want to. In his head, he's I don't want to fight like this.
His heart wants to, but his head is ooh, I still want to be able to have these thoughts in 20 years.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's difficult. He may put himself in sort of an uncomfortable middle ground where his game doesn't quite gel.
Yeah, I feel like that's kind of what I'm seeing, partially too, of like why I think Jim Miller was not that Jim Miller hasn't looked better than ever, but why Jim Miller was able to have so much success in that fight.
Post Lyme disease, Jim Miller is still the shit, man.
He is, no doubt. All right, that brings us to the odds on this fight. Eddie Alvarez is the slight underdog, in fact, opening at minus 157, now up to opening at minus 157, slowly climbing to plus 101 now. And Poirier, fucking hell. My dog is just going nuts. The slight favorite, opening at plus 123 and dropping to minus 125. I'm a little surprised by this, honestly, but I mean, because it's not like you can't just say like, oh, well, Eddie Alvarez just got knocked out. I mean, Dustin Poirier getting knocked out by Michael Johnson was not that long ago.
Yeah, it's all right. I mean, to me, it's like an even fight. Like the odds are pretty close to an even line. Let me ask, are you like rattling a plate on your desk to make your dog think that there's food to be had?
Oh, I have a little treat jar next to me that I shake.
That's a good idea. It's a good plan.
Yeah.
It's the second time I've noticed that when she barks.
It functions. She comes here, she gets a treat, she gets distracted.
All right.
Oh, whatever. Anyway, yeah, it should be an even fight, and I'm really interested to see how it'll go because I'm just really glad they made that fight. It makes me really happy.
Yeah.
Middleweight, Krzysztof Jotko, Dave Branch. Take it away. It's middleweight, Connor, so try to keep your pants on.
It's well, they're already off, but this is my area of expertise, right? Krzysztof Jotko has, for some time now, been one of my favorite dark horses in the UFC. He's a very solid fighter and better than most people think he is. He's sort of blossomed a like patient outfighters game into something a little more dangerous and a little more aggressive in recent fights. Was more of like just a guy who would neutralize you, prevent you from fighting your fight, keep the distance. We've seen that kind of change, probably going back to his fight with Scott Askham. We've seen in little steps, and then certainly revealing itself in full against Tandem McCrory, whom he melted with a counter left hand, and especially against Talis, whom he beat on the feet and dominated on the ground, which was very impressive. He tired him out. He hit him in the midst of quick little exchanges. He countered his takedowns, and he beat him up from top position. He had some pretty good ground and pound in that fight. And then that's all coupled with the fact that he's a very well-conditioned fighter who can maintain a pace. We've only seen him in 3-rounders, but he can maintain a pace consistently for 3 rounds. And in a lot of ways, Dave Branch is similar. But I think he's more of like what Jotko was before. He's still, I think, a neutralizer more than anything else. He's a very capable wrestler. He's a pretty solid athlete, and he's got good functional long-range boxing. And that's about it. And but it's enough. Like Dave Branch first of all, he deserves a lot of respect because he's coming back to the UFC after winning and defending both the middleweight and light heavyweight titles in World Series of Fighting. And while we have seen enough like other organization champions have trouble in the UFC when they realize how much more difficult, like the talent pool is just much deeper. And so they get thrown in against someone who is like a top 10 contender and realize that this top 10 contender may be better than the title challengers they were facing before. And I think that will probably be the case for Branch here. Jotko is just a little craftier, I think, in the sort of unplanned moments of the fight than Branch. And I think that may be the factor that really decides it, because Jotko, the things that stood out to me against Litis were, whizzering to stop a takedown and then nailing Litis with a shot when he was recovering. Or, like throwing a combination and then evading a counter and then coming back as Litis was a little off balance. And those are the moments that I don't typically see Dave Branch taking advantage of. He's like more happy. If you don't have success, he's happy. He's winning the fight. But Jotko is becoming a slightly more consistent and aggressive version of that kind of fighter. So I think it'll be a really interesting fight. It'll probably be one of the slower ones on the card, more of a chess match than anything else. But I think it'll be a fun chess match. And I think Dave Branch certainly deserves his shot back in the UFC. I just think Jotko is an underrated and very solid fighter. So I like Jotko by decision.
Yeah, I mean, it could be an actually really interesting fight if Jotko can quickly turn all scrambles on Dave Branch's head. Like, just suddenly make every grappling exchange a really big problem for Branch.
Yeah.
It could force Branch into a higher paced fight because he was expecting to be safe in an area and then isn't. But Branch, yeah, I think, watching him fight, a lot of what he does is done with the expectation that it will succeed. Which, I mean, I know that sounds pointless to say. Like, every fighter does everything with the expectation that they will succeed. But it's that idea of, like, I can throw a 1-2 combination without much thought to my defense or my positioning or whether it will land, because it's just going to succeed. Like, it's just going to work. And there's a lot more expectation than there is success in his case.
He doesn't have plans B, C, and D built in. Like Jotko has the layers a little more than Branch does.
And the big thing for Branch that's a big valuable tool, and was a big valuable tool, especially in World Series of Fighting, is that he's a really pretty explosive wrestler. Like, he's known for his jiu-jitsu. He's a Renzo Gracie black belt. But more than anything, as a grappler, he's much more of a lockdown grappler. Like, he's not the kind of grappler who's out there just flowing on people. He's like Demian Maia in the days where Demian Maia was in the fights where Demian Maia is just like riding out 3 rounds of somebody.
When he wasn't submitting anyone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where you're just like, yeah, okay, I see that he's a very good grappler, but or Jake Shields too. It's like, yes, I know Jake Shields is an incredibly good grappler, but what I see is Jake Shields just totally shutting down any ability for somebody to move underneath him. Branch kind of has that game, but it's a little harder to do that against good big athletes. I saw in his Lewis Taylor fight, Taylor was able to shuck him a lot and scramble back up. And, eventually Taylor got submitted, but Branch, even when he gets finishes, they're never early finishes. So they're almost never, other than Teddy Holder, which I don't really feel like that counts.
Sure.
He's just a guy who kind of has to drag you into this deep, slow fight where the expectation is that you're not really going to be able to get to him and he's going to be able to control everything. And I think Jotko is exactly the kind of guy who can get to him. He's creative standing in ways that I don't think Branch is going to be able to predict, like ways that are going to be difficult for him to control. And then he's a good enough scrambler and grappler that if Branch can plant him with a power double, I think Jotko can make that really difficult for Branch to have and keep control there.
I think there's a good chance he'll surprise Branch with a takedown. Jotko he's got a really crafty way of setting up his like twisting waist cinch takedowns off of his punches.
He's got a great offensive wrestling game. Really great.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, it's just, you have to kind of bet on Dave Branch to win this. Is Dave Branch can just absolutely shut down and control Krzysztof Jotko, can freeze him on the feet and can control him on the ground. And we haven't really seen that. I mean, Jotko, the evolution of Krzysztof Jotko is an evolution away from somebody who has that happen to him.
Yeah. Yeah. And now maybe Dave Branch will take a lesson from Will Brooks, who is in many ways a similar fighter, and like fight Jotko the way Brooks fought Ross Pearson. And that may work. Like, if Branch is good enough as a boxer, I think, to be aggressive and to put some volume on Jotko. Like, Jotko's fight with Brad Scott was fairly close. And it was mostly... Yeah.
the better comparison for me there would be to like take a page from Des Green.
Sure, yeah.
Who has the size for his division and has a similar stifling shutdown style that looked unexciting on regional, and then he shows up against what's his name?
Emmett, Josh Emmett.
Yeah, Josh Emmett. And suddenly you're like, who's this Des Green?
Yeah, sure. Maybe it'll be, like we have seen Dave Branch do that, but I think one thing you have to consider is that when he's a little more aggressive with his striking, I think it's usually when he feels he has a big speed advantage. Like that's more of a light heavyweight Dave Branch tactic. Like that's kind of how he fought Vinny Magalhaes. And I don't think he's going to be a lot faster than Krzysztof Jotko. And
Vinny Magalhaes is one of the consistently worst strikers at light heavyweight
defensively, especially. Yeah.
Yeah.
You can piece him up.
I mean, like Phil Davis and Vinny Magalhaes was a masterclass of.
Well, we got to watch that on the Depressed Us someday. two guys who have no business kickboxing having a 15-minute kickboxing match. How have we not thought of that before?
I don't know. We have to now, though. now I have to see it again. Yeah. All right. So yeah, I'm going with Jotko too. I think he'll take a decision. Just be able to work harder. Honestly, throw more, land more, surprise Branch on the feet, and keep it. Either make Branch not grapple with him, or maybe even win some grappling exchanges. Odds, Krzysztof Jotko is the favorite, opening at -150. This is ping pong down a bit, dropped all the way to -180, now back up to -150. And Branch opening at +110, going up to +151, dropping back down to +124. I'm fine with that. That feels right. Jotko deserves to be a favorite, but Branch has really cleaned up and polished up his game and has a knack for just shutting people down. So who knows if that just shows up in this fight too.
Yeah, and I think at middleweight is going to be a more forgiving style for Branch. Like I think he will. This is a tough fight for him, but I think he will have quite a bit of success back in the middleweight division. He's a
big, rangy fighter, and that in and of itself makes him tough to deal with.
Sure.
And that brings us to a featherweight bout: Frankie Edgar versus Yair Rodriguez. And is this me? Let's see, me.
That's you, yeah.
Me. Yair Rodriguez can win this fight, but a lot of it will depend on Yair Rodriguez being able to stop Frankie Edgar from taking him down, and from Frankie Edgar feeling like he can't afford to march in on Yair Rodriguez.
Mm-hmm.
If Frankie Edgar can walk in and close down Yair, even similar to what Alex Caceres did, then Edgar should be able to win this fight. Because, looking at his fight with Jeremy Stephens, one of the things that we saw in that fight that kind of lays out how Yair could win this is that Frankie Edgar wanted nothing to do with being in Jeremy Stephens' wheelhouse. That makes sense, especially if if you've listened to nothing but Joe Rogan for a decade. But it was the idea like, I cannot possibly afford, and I can't afford to do more than pop in, pot shot, and get out as quickly as possible on Jeremy Stephens. I can't afford to get in and put together a close takedown, to really chain a takedown. So a lot of what Frankie Edgar attempted for wrestling came from way outside, and credits Jeremy Stephens being occasionally a good counter wrestler, depending on the fight, depending on whether he expects you to wrestle him.
Pretty good at featherweight overall, I would say. Pretty hard to take down.
Yeah, but also, Moicano put him on his back a couple times too. It's just if Jeremy Stephens doesn't expect you to wrestle,
there are a lot of things in that fight that I don't think are very good indications of Jeremy Stephens at his best.
Yeah, if Jeremy Stephens doesn't expect you to wrestle, he can be caught way off guard.
Yeah.
But when he expects you to wrestle, he's really tough to take down. And Edgar too, like he got caught up in some bad long range shots that he got caught on the outside trying to wait for opportunities, and made it a little easier to track him, a little easier to sprawl on him. And it put him at range where eventually he did get caught with a random, like the toe end of a kick when he thought he was way out safe at range and could not be caught.
He got caught like in that transition between, and even then it was still kind of a freak thing. Like he actually had his hand in a good defensive position and the kick just barely snuck around and tapped him on the chin. But Jeremy Stephens has some very dangerous kicks, more dangerous even than his punches, you might say.
Yeah. And so that it sets up this idea of how Yair Rodriguez could win. If Frankie Edgar is at range, trying to find ways to just pot shot, get in and out, and playing this crafty in and out game without being able to set up shots as well as he wants, then Yair Rodriguez's distance kicking game is just beastly to deal with. It's an unholy aberration in MMA. If Frankie Edgar can close him down the way he otherwise tends to do in most of his fights, then Yair's defensive game is his wrestling is not bad, but a lot of it is his incredible scrambling ability and his really venomous grappling ability. And Frankie Edgar has shown a lot of ability to shut that down. Like that does not tend to be the thing that gives Frankie Edgar problems. And so without Yair catching Frankie Edgar, I just see too many opportunities for Frankie Edgar to land clean shots inside and to work some wrestling on Yair to keep this fight everywhere but at long distance where he has to deal with Yair's kicking game.
Yeah, I'm going to offer a couple of counter opinions. The one thing I think is that I think Frankie Edgar is less of an in and out fighter now than he used to be.
Yeah.
I think part of that's because he's getting older and he probably just can't move as much as he used to. But in some ways it has made him a better fighter because a lot of Frankie Edgar's movement was extraneous and pointless. Everyone always talked about his footwork and how amazing it was, but like was one of my first awakenings realizing that like technique may not actually just be the things that commentators say. And I was like, if his footwork's so amazing, why is he getting hit so much? Shouldn't really good footwork prevent some of that? And I think he's less hittable now because his footwork is genuinely better.
Yeah,
it's better and it's more efficient. So like, even though he got clipped with that weird kick by Jeremy Stephens, I still thought his defense in the pocket was really good.
Oh yeah.
And he stuck around in the pocket with Stephens a little more than I think he probably would have 5 years ago, considerably more. But did a good job of like rolling under punches and countering, catching things on his gloves. He's very aware. He looks like an experienced fighter who has turned the fact that he can't push the kind of pace he used to into a good thing, that he has learned the right lessons to not only, make up for that, but to build a changing game around it. But how many guys has Frankie Edgar pressured really effectively? Like, I think that's the big question here, is when we see Frankie Edgar have to come after somebody, I don't know how good he is. Like Jose Aldo. I mean, we're talking about very good fighters here, but like Jose Aldo, who else has he come after? Maybe like Ben Henderson.
His plan against Cub Swanson was coming after him really with wrestling.
Yeah, and even there though, he would come after him in bursts. Like Cub was like kind of controlling the center, and Frankie would be moving around him, and then would come after him with a flurry. But if Frankie has to constantly chase you around, I think that is not his wheelhouse. I think Frankie's a lot better, when you're chasing him around, or when you're sort of in the center and he's running circles around you and making you constantly adjust. That's where he gets his openings for his punches and his takedowns. And so while I definitely agree that Frankie's a much better wrestler than Yair Rodriguez, although I think Rodriguez's athleticism alone makes him a pretty good scrambler and counter wrestler when he needs to be.
Oh yeah, no, he surprises a lot of people because he'll get taken down and then he just jumps up, and you're just like, how did he teleport back to his feet there.
Yeah. And I think, too, that Frankie's ground game, which is quite possibly the best in the division, his top game, is going to neutralize anything that Yair wants to do off of his back. Like, he's not really going to have to worry about the submissions too much.
No.
So those are the avenues where he wins. But having to chase after Yair Rodriguez might be a problem for him. And also being like, here's a crazy fact. Frankie Edgar is now at featherweight, smaller division than lightweight. Yair Rodriguez is the tallest and almost the longest fighter he's ever faced. He is the tallest guy he's ever faced, even though it's at featherweight. And
when you fought Hermes Franca, Sean Shirk, BJ Penn, Gray Maynard, Benson Henderson, all small lightweights.
Yeah, and Yair is like this new era of guys who are just huge for their divisions. And the crazy thing about Yair is that it doesn't seem to affect his stamina that he's so big. And he jumps around more easily than a young John Jones. Like, he has that sort of dynamic instinct despite his build. And he can throw a lot of crazy shit for a long time without slowing down. I say this every time I talk about him, but it's because it deserves to be reiterated. Him fighting 5 rounds against Alex Caceres, doing all the crazy shit that he does at altitude, at elevation, is nonsense.
Yeah.
It's the only thing that's crazier. It's actually crazier. Like, Tony Ferguson fought a crazy pace against Rafael dos Anjos in Mexico City, which is a harder environment, compared to, I think it was in like Salt Lake City, the Caceres fight. But he also doesn't do as much crazy shit as Yair Rodriguez, who is just like jumping kicks. Everything is insanely dynamic. So I think that we're going to see Yair land some good shots and kind of run Frankie around. And I think that we may see a moment at which he hurts Frankie on the way in with like a jumping knee or something like that. And I think that, if Frankie can press his game, if he can get him consistently into the wrestling engagements, it'll be Frankie's fight. But I'm just not confident that he can do it. So I'm going with Yair Rodriguez, but I can definitely see how Frankie wins this fight. It's just, it's a tough one. I think it's a perfect fight for Yair at this point, in terms of matchmaking, because if he loses, he lost to Frankie Edgar. No big deal. He's still young. And if he wins, like, he's there. He's ready. He's ready to start fighting other top guys in the division.
Yeah. I think the pause I have on that is that he, okay, maybe the Alex Caceres fight shouldn't have been a split decision. That was crazy. But he did get hit a lot by Alex Caceres. And Alex Caceres did have a lot of success marching Yair Rodriguez down.
Yeah, but some of that is the reach, is the fact that Caceres is Rodriguez's size. I think that had a lot to do with it.
It might. But I like so many of the things that Yair Rodriguez does when he gets pressured with, like,
definitely, yeah,
with his boxing, are just bad, and they're always going to be bad. It's just a question of how much. They're always going to be a problem. It's just a question of how big a problem. Like, I definitely see him on the Edson Barboza track, where it's going to be like, well, the same kind of shit. It's going to be there. It's going to be that hole in your game every single time. It's just that every time you fight, you've made the hole just a little bit smaller.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that the thing, like, I'd feel better about that if I have thought more of Frankie Edgar as a pressure fighter.
Yeah. But even BJ Penn had like some success early when he just kind of went after Yair Rodriguez right away. And then it was when he got outside and he was like, oh, okay, now I got to like stalk this guy. You were like, oh God, BJ, what are you doing? So I don't see Frankie Edgar getting caught up in that game of stalking Yair.
Yeah.
So he can easily get caught by something crazy, but if he doesn't, I think that he's going to be able to be more he's going to implement a game more consistently, moment to moment, that is going to be the antithesis of Yair's all high flying all the time style.
Yeah, no doubt. If we're talking about the guys that Yair Rodriguez has faced, Frankie Edgar is not just objectively the best, he's also like the most thoughtful and adaptable of anyone he's fought, the person who gets better with every round. So he is going to have to build up a pretty sizable lead early, I think, or stop Frankie to beat him.
I mean, Andre Fili is Rodriguez's best win.
Yeah.
That is what it is, you know? Yair Rodriguez is the underdog, only very slightly. Opened at plus 186, has been falling ever since, now at plus 108. Frankie Edgar, the favorite, opening at minus 254, now up to minus 132. So I feel a little bit like there's some hype in there, but I mean, I can see why. I know why. I'm hyped about Yair too. Like, I can't dismiss it. It's just
can you get a bet on Frankie Edgar by decision?
Frankie Edgar by decision is plus 149.
I mean, if you're going to bet on Frankie Edgar, like that's the tack I took when he fought Jeremy Stevens.
Yeah.
And like, you're going to bet on Frankie Edgar, you mostly bet on him by decision, especially against someone who's like tough and athletic like Rodriguez. Yeah. Maybe Edgar by decision at underdog odds is not bad.
Oops. I just closed out of that for some reason. All right. That brings us to Demian Maia versus Jorge Masvidal. Or George. I never know which one it is. Like, I know he's not Brazilian, but I've heard so many people say George Masvidal.
I'm pretty sure it's Jorge in his case.
Anyway.
Is it me?
Go after it.
It's a tough fight to call. I think a lot of people are really just thinking that Demian Maia is going to steamroll Jorge Masvidal, and I can't countenance that. Like, Masvidal is a lot more like Rory McDonald than any of the other guys that Maia has been facing. And McDonald fought the new version of Demian Maia, the welterweight, aggressive, phenomenal grappler, and beat him. You know, like, it was a very tough fight. He had to really dig deep and he almost, you know, it was a good chance he could have lost if Maia had gotten in on the third round takedown. But the fact that McDonald was so well conditioned and that he had good range striking and that he had good defensive wrestling, that was enough. Very good defensive wrestling. And Jorge Masvidal has those things. He's very well conditioned. He's a very good boxer from long range, and he is a very good wrestler. So there's a lot of things in there that make it difficult for Demian Maia. Let's see. Hold on. So the thing you have to worry about with Masvidal is we've seen new aggressive Masvidal, right? I think that's been a big thing. I think he thinks he's going to do that against Demian Maia. If you've seen his pre-fight interviews for this event, he's like, hey, if you don't want to see a XXX rated snuff film, don't tune in on May 13th. You know, he's like, he's really selling the violent angle. He's like, you remember what I said before the Cerrone fight? It's going to be worse, which, you know, that's fine. I'm not sure if he's going to be able to stick to that against Demian Maia because, like, he knows he can shake Donald Cerrone. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But Demian Maia is going to put pressure on him. He's going to make him defend a lot. And so I think there's a chance that Maia is going to force Jorge to revert to defensive, tactical Jorge rather than aggressive knockout artist Jorge. You know what I mean?
Jorge Masvidal's trash talk is one of those things that, like, it's a little like Floyd Mayweather's trash talk, where, I would never give it any credence. You know, like, I'm not saying I expect him to lose, but I will never expect Jorge Masvidal to, I said I'm going to go out there and I'm going to kill this guy and I'm going to kill him. I'm like, no, you're going to go out there and you're going to fight a smart fight because that's the only way that you know how to fight. And if that smart fight ends up with you knocking him out, great. But that's, you know.
Yeah, maybe that's part of it. It's just like Masvidal fights a smart fight, and the smart fight against Cerrone was to get after him and beat him up.
Yeah. And
that's going to be harder to do, right? Like, Maia does not need you coming after him to get his takedowns. But it kind of doesn't matter how you fight Demian Maia as far as his takedowns are concerned. He's a very, very good wrestler. And with Masvidal, who was for most of his career a lightweight, I have to imagine Maia will also be considerably stronger than him in the tie-ups. Maia is a pretty big welterweight. I don't think we talk about how strong he is for this division enough. It's a big factor. And so we have Masvidal who can defend takedowns well, but and may or may not rack up enough points at range to override the success Maia has on the ground. And we have Maia who gets takedowns very well and goes for them relentlessly when he needs them, and who is just the best in the sport on the ground. Is just insanely, like, he is the Floyd Mayweather of grappling. It's like a very simple, very direct game, all of the pieces of which fit together perfectly. It all makes sense. Everything leads to like 2 or 3 other predetermined options. Nothing surprises Demian Maia on the ground. So I think I have to pick Demian Maia. It's a tough fight to call, you know, but I think I have to pick Maia because Masvidal is not the most dangerous striker. And I'm not sure if he's going to be able to get after Maia, which I think might be a better idea than just playing really defensive. And then there's the fact that just tactically, Masvidal is a good defensive wrestler, but he doesn't stop people from getting in on his hips. Like, he's a good wrestler when you've gotten into the clinch, but people get in there. He stands tall. He keeps his hands high. You can get in on his legs. And I don't think that being a good wrestler against most people with that approach is the same as being a good wrestler against Maia. So until I see him get Demian Maia on his hips and stop him from getting the takedown, I'm not really sure that he can. So I'm going with Maia by decision.
Yeah, you're making me question my feeling of my pick of Masvidal here.
It's a close fight, man. I do think the people are like, oh, Maia's going to run through him. I think those people are dead wrong. Masvidal is a tough stylistic matchup relative to the other guys, like a tougher stylistic matchup than Carlos Condit.
Oh, much tougher. That Carlos Condit fight was always going to go one way.
Yeah. He just, like, he's not going to get run through with the wrestling the same way that other guys do.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, I mean, the interesting thing looking at the fights for Maia that have been good and the fights that have been tough, a lot of the fights that have been good have been guys who are either very willing to grapple or have no wrestling game at all, you know, or have not a great one. Carlos Condit, Matt Brown, you know, especially recently. And then your, you know, guys who are very willing to grapple in Gunnar Nelson and Neil Magny and Ryan LaFleur, although Ryan LaFleur technically tends to want to box. But the LaFleur fight was hard. Like, that was a hard fight for Demian Maia.
5 rounds is always going to be hard for him, man. He just can't. Yeah. Like, 3-round fights are sometimes difficult for him as far as the gas tank goes.
Yeah. And then obviously, yeah, you got Rory McDonald and Jake Shields, which Jake Shields is just the Jake Shields aberration, whatever. The Shields vortex.
Yeah.
And Masvidal doesn't really fit any of that, any of the type of these guys he's fought lately. He fits Ryan LaFleur more than anything, and he's a much better striker and perhaps a better defensive wrestler than Ryan LaFleur. Maybe not.
I think Rory McDonald is the strongest comparison.
Yeah.
Like, that's the guy that's the Maia opponent at welterweight that he most resembles.
Yeah, and Rory beat him, even only over 3 rounds. And the question there too is, like, if Rory McDonald had been more willing to pull the trigger, would Rory McDonald have finished him? You know?
Yeah.
Could he have done more to beat him? Because that was, you know, as we have seen over time too, Rory McDonald and pulling the trigger when you can are not always synonymous.
Yeah, it's tricky, man, because sometimes Maia's stamina looks fine.
Yeah.
Right? Sometimes, like Gunnar Nelson, back and forth fight, fast pace on the ground, not breathing hard at all.
No.
3 rounds of attacking Matt Brown, who did a very good job of defending, not breathing hard at all. Maybe it's just that, like, how much can you make him scramble? How much can you make him get up and down, like shoot for takedowns? But sometimes even then, he looks okay.
Yeah.
And then other times he's 38 years old, so I think it's just unreliable.
I just have this. He's 39 now,
39,
actually.
yeah. Just turned 39 in November.
I have this sneaking suspicion that Masvidal is going to beat him, that the counter wrestling and the boxing are too much, and that he's not going to give Maia any of the kind of game Maia wants, despite standing tall, which will give him entries. I just feel like he's not going to fall into the traps that Condit and Brown, Brown with his like super funky wide, not as able to be mobile while trying to be mobile stance, the modern Matt Brown.
Mm-hmm.
And Magny with his always puzzlingly willing to grapple and just seeming to not really be prepared to fight Demian Maia at all.
Yeah.
I think this is going to be much more difficult. Like, Masvidal is a much more active, mobile, range fighter to try and track down, and then a very precise striker and a good defensive wrestler. I think he can cause enough problems that also it kind of just feels like one of those storyline things where it's like Maia's had to wait all this time. There's this title shot he's supposed to get.
You got to be worried for Maia's sake after Whittaker-Jacare, right? Like,
yeah.
It's a very similar thing, like dangerous striker, really coming into his own against an aging submission specialist who really should have gotten a shot at the title or should be in the picture. And Maia has a better case than Jacare did. He really should be challenging Tyron Woodley right now. But, it may just be that last bump in the road that he can't get over.
So I'm picking Masvidal here, and I just feel it in my bones, and I got to go with the heart pick here. And I'll be really happy if Maia once again wins and like.
How does anyone not enjoy Demian Maia winning? Like, he's just he's awesome. He's great.
So odds here, Masvidal opened at plus 135, is now down to minus 122. And Maia opened at minus 175, is now up to minus 102. So trended close to even, with Masvidal as a slight favorite. And I don't know about Masvidal being the favorite, but even he's right to me.
Yeah, I agree.
All right, that brings us to our co-main event: Joanna Jedrzejczyk, Jessica Andrade. And this is me. Yeah. I'm so looking forward to this fight. I'm picking Joanna partially because Joanna has entered the rare hall of I will not pick her to lose until I see her lose. It's that sort of Anderson Silva place, that Jose Aldo place, where I just have to be like, I need to see it to believe it. It has to happen for me to understand how it's going to happen. But Andrade certainly has a case. I mean, the thing Joanna really likes to do, she's great. She moves, she cuts all the angles, she enters on angles, she exits on angles. But she likes to sit down and throw 3 or 4 punches and a kick when she gets into the pocket every time. And that means that she's there to be hit on, in the middle of that exchange. She doesn't have the best head movement, the best like defensive upper body movement in the middle of that exchange, and she can be nailed.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Andrade, for her part, is not actually at her best when you are coming at her and throwing a combo. She's much better when you're backing up and you back yourself into a corner, and then she can start unloading on you. But we've seen Karolina Kowalkiewicz drop Joanna. We've seen Claudia Gadelha drop Joanna. Kowalkiewicz is a better technical striker, but doesn't punch as hard, not the same level of athlete. Gadelha is a better athlete, but doesn't flurry or, doesn't strike nearly as consistently as Andrade. And so Andrade exists on this sort of midpoint continuum of potential people who can hurt Joanna Jedrzejczyk. I think the big thing for me is really just about exiting on angles. And that's where Joanna and her success come in. Is that she can get in on a flurry, maybe get hit in return, but exit on an angle so that Andrade can't just chase her down with a big winging combination. Because like I was watching the Angela Hill fight, and the big thing Angela Hill did in that fight, two things, one of which will not be a problem for Joanna, and we just kind of know that from the outset, is Hill started out like really active, more active footwork than I've ever seen from her before.
Yeah.
And within a minute and a half, it tired her out.
Mm-hmm.
And her footwork was back to what we know of her, which is that she tends to need to plant and be a bit flat-footed to get her offense working. She started out like very much in this sort of alliance MMA styled, active, in and out, moving Dominic Cruz-esque style, and then like a minute and a half later, she's just like, okay, shit, I gotta fight a more normal fight. So we know that Joanna can not only stay on her bike, but can do it every single round after round. Second thing is that when Hill retreated, every time she retreated, she cut a lot of angles moving at range. When she was at range, she would constantly be circling one way or the other and mostly be hard to hit because of it. But when Andrade actually came after her and started to throw at her, she'd back straight up until her butt hit the cage, and then the moment her butt hit the cage, she'd try to cut an angle.
Yeah.
And so all of her defensive footwork was based around hitting the cage first and then angling out. And that just meant that she walked herself straight into a trap and then had to fight her way out of it every time. And that's not Joanna Jedrzejczyk. Like, she's not going to back herself into the cage. Also, in this event, like, she'll be in a big cage. She'll be in a massive, the big UFC octagon with a lot of room to work. And I think that, as long as she keeps her footwork going, and as long as she doesn't get knocked out by a single shot, I trust her to be the matador. I trust her to be able to put enough volume on Andrade and cut all her angles every round to win this fight. But she'll have to, because she's not an great offensive wrestler. And for as good as, Andrade is a better wrestler than most for her division, but I don't see Andrade taking over with her wrestling and grappling. Joanna's counter wrestling game is too good. Her counter grappling is too good. She's too good at getting up.
I think Andrade's wrestling is really just based on the fact that she's much bigger and stronger as strawweight than she was elsewhere. It could be a factor, but is she going to be way stronger with her takedowns than Gadelia? Probably not.
Probably not.
And she's certainly not as technical.
Yeah. And in the clinch, if Andrade is not unloading her hands in the clinch, then she's not going to have great success clinch striking with Joanna. Yeah. So it's going to be Joanna, can she turn out when she throws combos? And if she can, Andrade is going to just be hitting air.
Yeah, I mean, I agree that the clinch is not going to favor Andrade. I think that if Joanna wins this fight, I think it would be smart to make the clinch be a big factor. Mm-hmm. I think she doesn't want to be standing in the pocket with Andrade. She wants to, when Andrade starts to throw, close the distance, start hitting her with elbows and knees, where she is the much more technical fighter. And, Andrade is very strong, but Angela Hill is tiny. She's very slim and very slight for the division. Joanna cuts a good amount of weight. She's a strong strawweight. She's got that wiry strength to her. So I think she can probably, especially as the fight goes on, hold her own in the clinch by just being more technical. And I think she'll have an edge at range when she's moving and turning angles. I think really if Joanna wins this fight, we'll be looking at like a Muay Thai style approach where it's like a lot of kicks at range, push kicks, low kicks, high kicks, to keep Andrade from letting her hands go, and then clinches when Andrade tries to close the distance. But it's the Dutch style that Joanna has that worries me against Andrade. That habit that she cannot seem to break of just wanting to throw a flurry and then finish with a leg kick has gotten her into trouble. And I think that is her go-to response when somebody gets in close, is that she wants to like counter you really quickly and throw a kick and then break away.
Yeah,
she wants to plant and trade and then go away. And she's not a great defensive fighter in the pocket. She's, she like keeps her shoulders really high and she tucks her head, but she's pretty static with head movement. She's letting her hands go, so there's nothing protecting her chin. She can be caught in those moments, and that's really dangerous against Andrade, who is, not just a very powerful puncher, but a very good combination puncher. Throws well with both hands, hits the body. And the other thing that really gives Andrade a good shot in this fight is that her conditioning seems to be phenomenal.
Oh, yeah.
They said when she fought Hill that she had never even done strength and conditioning, which is insane to believe. But she has been doing it for this fight. I've seen the videos and the embedded videos, and she's been doing sprints and she's been doing all kinds of heavy lifts and stuff like that. I think she'll probably come in a little stronger. And the fact that she can throw at a clip which is basically identical to Joanna's at a rate which, like for as long as Joanna seems to be able to do it. We have not seen, you still have to give Jedrzejczyk the edge in the championship rounds because we have seen her take fights over in the championship rounds. But Hill went 3 really hard rounds with Angela Hill and didn't slow down. Like the third round is when she threw and landed the most punches.
The big question to me will be, will Andrade's conditioning hold up if she's also getting if Jedrzejczyk can do some good body and leg work?
Yeah, if she's getting hit a lot more in general than she has against anybody else. Yeah. But the question also stands, can Joanna's conditioning hold up if she is being battered to the body over and over again? And that is something that Andrade is going to do. So I think that Joanna will probably get out of the first few rounds, but I think they're going to be hard. And I think she's going to have to go to war to win this fight. And we know she can do that. She's tough and she's insanely confident in a good way. And she's very well conditioned. She is truly a championship caliber fighter. She is a deserving champion. But I just have this kind of feeling with those knockdowns against Gadelha and against Kowalkiewicz, like Andrade is going to pressure more than Kowalkiewicz did. She hits harder. She throws more punches at a time. And Joanna likes to respond to that pressure with those Dutch combos. Yeah. I just don't like it. So I think that Joanna will probably win the last few rounds, but I think it may be a deficit that's going to be difficult to overcome. I think she'll probably get knocked down a couple times early in the fight. And I think Andrade will win a decision.
Ooh, picking the dominant champ to lose by decision. That has not treated people kindly over the years.
Yeah, I don't think it'll be a decision in which like Andrade wins the decision per se. I think she will.
You will feel she won the fight.
I think that she will win the first part of the fight big enough that she gets the decision. Like it may very. I almost said bigly. I'm this far above Donald Trump. I think that she will win it with enough emphasis in those first few rounds that it carries her, the momentum carries her through the later part of the fight. When Joanna will probably take over. And again, like I don't think Joanna's going to be able to take over like she did against Gadelha. Gadelha gave her a super hard fight. Yep. And while Andrade can't wrestle like Gadelha did, she can pressure in a similar way, just with something that is more likely to actually hurt Joanna.
Yeah.
So I think it's going to be a difficult fight. But it's also the hardest fight of Andrade's career. So
yeah. All right. Joanna opened at -165. There were a couple of spikes in those odds, but it's still -165. And Andrade opened at +125 and is now +136. So
I think she might be worth a little look. I mean, most people agree she's probably like the most dangerous challenger that Joanna's ever faced.
Andrade by KO TKO is +470.
Could be, man. Like I'm saying, Joanna getting dropped, getting hurt. Like I think she's going to survive some knockdowns, but if she doesn't, yeah, it could be. You know, I don't think she'll shut off like the way most people Andrade knocks out. They kind of shut off and cover up, and she flurries on them. But she does hit harder than Joanna does.
Yeah, this is going to be a weird one.
It's going to be fun, man. It's going to be a great fight. It's going to
be really fun. All right, that brings us to our heavyweight title fight. Stipe Miocic, Junior Dos Santos.
Well, I won't pick the title challenger to win by decision.
Hey!
But I am picking Junior Dos Santos to win. I think it kind of surprised me from the get-go that Dos Santos was a pretty decent underdog to Miocic, even though he pretty clearly won their first fight. Like, we have seen these guys match up in the past. And I don't think it was like people say, oh, I'm not sure actually where people are getting it from. People seem to think that Miocic has really, really improved since fighting Junior. And I think in some ways, but pretty small ways, I think he's more or less the same guy, maybe a little more confident. But I don't know. People look at it like, oh, he's the champion now, so he must have gotten better. But, like, look at the way he fights. He kind of looks the same. And I don't think that was the best version of Junior Dos Santos that beat Stipe Miocic. I think that was a Dos Santos who was too muscular, who was slow, who had just been beaten to death almost by Cain Velasquez in 2 consecutive fights, and who had to rely a lot on his chin, and was also, like as he was against Cain, getting backed into the fence really easily. And so seeing the way that Junior fought Ben Rothwell gives me a lot of faith that he can sort of not just recapture the form he was in before the Velasquez losses, but actually sort of exceed it. Because I think he's really finding his style as a long-range fighter. And we saw little glimpses of it against Alistair Overeem, and it didn't work. But, you know, it was the first fight that Junior had at ATT, first fight he had with a new camp. And I also think that Alistair is a more dangerous long-range fighter than Stipe. I mean, really what Alistair did to throw Junior off is that he just refused boxing range. He just would not get on the end of Junior's jab. He moved around a lot. He threw a lot of kicks and worked his punches off of the threat of those kicks. And so that's not something I think Stipe can do, at least not as well as Alistair. And I also think that Stipe, quite the opposite of Alistair Overeem, who like struggles to stick to a game plan without crumbling and running away, I think Stipe kind of might struggle to stick to a game plan without getting into a war. You know, I think he likes to dust it up. And I'm not sure. Like, I think it might actually be wise for him to play a long range game against Junior, to work him with kicks and to kind of go through a few rounds like that before he starts pressing the wrestling and the pocket boxing, and to make Junior come after him and counter him. You know, he's got a good counter right hand. Miocic does. But I'm not sure he can do something like that before that itch to start trading takes over. And if he doesn't do that, or if that itch gets the better of him and he starts pressuring Junior like they did in the first fight, I think it's going to have a bigger effect on his gas tank than Junior's. Junior is a very well-conditioned fighter. He's a very good defensive wrestler. And I think you have to be Cain Velasquez to attack wrestling on him for 5 rounds without exhausting yourself, because he's going to make you work very, very hard to get a good position on him, and then he's going to pop right back up. And then we have Junior being a fantastic body puncher. Great body jab, great straight right. We've seen a nice left hook to the body a few times. That played a big role in the first Miocic fight. I think with a slimmer, faster, more confident Junior, that's going to play an even larger role here. And so I think we'll see a lot of Stipe, who is really best at mid-range, kind of struggling to get to that range, while Junior sort of works him over a little bit from the outside. Miocic will definitely have his moments. He's a confident guy. We saw against Overeem how he can be crazily willing to be aggressive. But we also saw how Overeem hurt him twice pretty badly in that fight while doing so. And so if Junior is sitting down on counter rights and moving after each pot shot and just not allowing himself to be frozen against the fence as easily as he did the last time, I think we'll probably see Dos Santos TKO in maybe round 3 or 4.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you, honestly. One of the big things for me too is watching Stipe fight. Um, a lot of what really seems to work well for Stipe is momentum.
Mm-hmm.
Like he's a better momentum fighter than he is a just like be the sort of crafty, change the fight on a moment, set you up kind of fighter.
Yeah.
He's not the kind of guy that is really going to set you up for something sneaky you didn't see coming. He's the kind of guy who he's gonna, mix it up with you a little, and if you show him that you don't like what he's giving you, he will give you a lot more of that. He will find a way to, like he hit Alistair Overeem, and a lot of his exchanges with Overeem were just back and forth, and then he would plug Overeem with something hard, and Overeem would cover a little bit, and Miocic would then start to like, okay, well now I'll feint a jab and throw an uppercut and double up my left hook and just start pouring it on the moment you've given me a little crack.
Yeah, same thing against Junior. Like he consistently caught Junior when he was pulling away really tall, and then he would throw 1-2, overextend on the right hand and catch him while his chin was in the air, and then he would start actually like intelligently boxing him with his back to the fence.
Yeah, and Dos Santos, like, he makes some of those mistakes, but he never has been the fighter to make those mistakes for long.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of why he won like you talk about why he won the first fight, is that he never gave momentum to Miocic for more than a moment. And without that ability, Stipe kind of has to just kind of hope that he can just change the fight on something random. Like he'll just, it'll be like throw out a head kick or hit a takedown suddenly and dump you on the ground, and then maybe be able to pour it on from a dominant position. But if
he might be able to, like, Junior probably can't take a shot as well as he did the first time.
Yeah.
But I think it at least puts him on par with Stipe in terms of chin. Like we've seen Stipe get hurt badly recently, and we have seen Stipe get knocked out before as well.
Yeah. And yeah, like the Junior Dos Santos who showed up against Ben Rothwell, obviously Miocic is a much more fluid, fleet-footed fighter than Ben Rothwell.
Yeah.
But that version of JDS was really on his bike, like really minding everything.
Yeah.
And like, okay, I got to get in and out. I got to play my range smart. I got to move my feet well and pot shot and not get caught anywhere. And all those kinds of things are the kinds of things that will not allow Stipe Miocic to build any momentum.
Yeah.
And that, to me, turns into Junior Dos Santos winning. And it's a heavyweight fight, so over 5 rounds, yeah, he probably knocks him out at some point because it's a heavyweight fight.
Yeah, and I think too, like if he can keep that distance, if he can plug away at the body and times Miocic as he comes in more and more slowly with each round from being worn down, then like a lot of the shots he caught Ben Rothwell with on the way in would have ended someone who wasn't Ben Rothwell.
Yeah.
Like he staggered Ben Rothwell twice, but he hit him with shots more than comparable to the left hand that Overeem knocked Miocic down with. His timing was amazing. The punches were ramrod straight, and we know Dos Santos has speed and more than enough power to hurt any heavyweight. It's just that Ben Rothwell is like one of the most durable guys ever. He's insanely tough, and Miocic is tough too, but I don't think he's that tough.
Yeah, and of course it's heavyweight, so Junior Dos Santos could just get plugged with a right hand early in the fight and dropped, and that'll be it.
Yeah, totally. Yep. Miocic is like he's extremely game. Like that was the thing we learned about Miocic in the first Dos Santos fight. He will not be discouraged. That was like his first big step up in competition after a few good wins. And the reason that everyone thought it was so close, even though I think Junior probably won 4 rounds, close rounds, but won 4 of them, was because they didn't expect that out of Stipe. It was like, he's a middle of the road fighter. This is Junior Dos Santos we're talking about. But that is a defining moment for Miocic. He's game, man. He doesn't get scared of anybody. He doesn't back down. He will go in there and try to work his game. And that does make him dangerous for a Junior Dos Santos who has absorbed more punishment in fewer fights than like anybody other than Roy Nelson in this division. Like the Cain Velasquez fights and then the Overeem knockout and even the Miocic fight, we have seen him survive a lot of beatings. And so, yeah, that gives Miocic a serious window of opportunity. But stylistically, I think it favors Dos Santos even a little better than it did the last time.
It might. I think Dos Santos is definitely a much more careful fighter than he used to be.
I hope he continues to build on what he showed in that Rothwell fight, man, because it was beautiful. Like it
really was.
It was a performance that would have honestly, again, it was against Ben Rothwell, but it would have impressed a lot of actual like diehard boxing heads. It was a very good display of tactical boxing.
You know, every time you say that and then you try to, and they're just like, whatever, it's MMA. It
was a good show of boxing, man. It was really very impressive.
All right. Dos Santos opened at plus 167, has slowly dropped and had a steep drop now to he's at plus 108 now. And Miocic opened at minus 205 and slowly was dropping and had a steep drop as well and is now at minus 133. So those odds have gotten a lot closer just in the past, I guess, because they've been open for a while. So it's in the past week and a half or so that they really jumped up and got a lot closer as this fight approached. And that's it, I think. I mean, it's a heavyweight fight with two guys who have knockout power and have shown potential to get dropped by shots. So I'm not going to argue with the odds anyway, one way or the other on that.
No, this top two fights, man, they should be amazingly fun. Like it's just styles that match up very, very well for purposes of entertainment.
And, then you got Edgar Rodriguez and Poirier Alvarez on there and
Skelly Knight. I think Reyes Vic. I think.
Yep.
Yeah, it's going to be awesome, man. It's a good fucking card.
Such a good card. All right. On that note, you can find me on Twitter at TheZaneTime. You can find Connor on Twitter at BoxingBush. You can find both of us over at BloodyElbow.com. Give this video a like. That's a thumbs up thing down there. And subscribe to our YouTube channel, MMANation.com, DOTCOM. That's where you get all the rest of our Bloody Elbow shows, videos, analysis, all that good stuff. We'll be back with the MMA Depressed Us next week because there's no UFC event, but we'll also have Knuckle Up and If I Did It and Heavy Hands and all that good stuff. So thanks, everyone, for tuning in, and we will see you next time.